and I'm hoping that they get here soon because we only have Bill for about an hour or so. But this is the after show for the debate with Erika and Bill Morgan that I helped co-moderate, and along with Standing for Truth. And RJ and TD Lane are both people who were participating and who got to me the fastest with requests to be on the after show. So it was first come, first serve on that one. So let's start with Bill. Bill, how are you today?
I'm fine.
All right. And RJ, how are you today?
Early, still juice, but fine today. Had a little light snow in Spokane. Otherwise, things are plugging along.
All right. And TD Lane, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I woke up too early, but that's what coffee's for.
Okay. Well, so, you know what? I guess I would like to just start with saying, we'll go with Bill because he was actually one of the debaters. Bill, how do you think the debate went?
I think it went really well. She's a very nice lady, very articulate. And just in general, I feel she avoided some of the big questions to be convenient and to reside in what I call safe spaces. And I respect evolutionists, I respect atheists, I respect everyone, but they'll often look at the end of a femur and ignore origin of matter, origin of energy, origin of life, etc. But very nice lady.
All right. So now one of the questions that I have that I've actually I wanted to ask during the debate, but that wasn't my place in the debate. But hey, this is the after show. I can do whatever I want. So let's say that in the pre-show we were talking a little bit about the Civil War, right? So let's say that you wanted to have a discussion with someone who disagreed with you about, say, the Battle of Gettysburg. But what they wanted to talk about once they got to the debate was the ratification of the Constitution during the Revolutionary War. And their argument as to why...
Or the Magna Carta.
Right, and the relevance as to why they said that was a good thing to discuss about Gettysburg was that, well, without that event, we wouldn't have had the Battle of Gettysburg. Why is that a different changing of topic from when you set up a debate about evolution and then want to talk about the origin of matter?
Well, as you know, I'm the creation boy, and creation includes the origin of matter, origin of energy, origin of life. Remember my baseball, Mr. RJ and TD, I don't know if you saw my baseball inning thing. It was in my introduction where I said, hey, let's talk about the baseball game. And a buddy of mine would say, yeah, but I only want to talk about the 9th inning. Well, I'd like to talk about the whole game.
But in that case,
but if you can't explain the 9th inning, does your view of the rest of the game really carry much weight?
Yes.
So I guess then the thing that I would wonder is why not have a debate called something else? Because when you
very good. The title wasn't that, though. The title was Creation versus Evolution.
Right, which is why it always seems odd to me when someone goes away from the actual title of the debate and goes into things that aren't evolution.
I agree. And the title was Creation versus Evolution. It wasn't, why do we have so many different kinds of animals, different species of animals?
Okay. Well, but evolution doesn't deal with origins or bust issues. And so if you want to label it an origins question, fine and dandy. Then they can go into all of that. And Erika, by her own point, is that that's not an area that she's as well versed in than she is in the biology. So you're trying to catch her on things that have not concerned her because she's too busy paying attention to the billions of years of life later.
That's a very convenient answer, but I'm not trying to catch her on anything. We're trying to get to the truth of how we got here.
Well, no, it's not. It's a serious philosophical divide. The anti-evolutionists of Darwin's time, particularly in France, took an origins or bust position. And oddly enough, Ernst Haeckel, evolutionist, was obsessed with origins or bust kinds of things, that they had to figure out how life originated, The whole critical factor of why Darwin and Wallace changed the nature of the debate is to say, we don't need to know how life originated to look at what it did after that. And you can worry about how the first replicator functioned fine and dandy. That's a fascinating question, but it doesn't make any of the forensic data go away. That's why I asked you about the therapsids, and I was not surprised that you didn't know anything about them.
You got me on the therapsid, but is your goal truth, or is your goal just to hammer how wonderful evolution is? What's your goal?
No, of course it's truth.
That's my question.
I think a great deal about how life originated. I have a monstrously large section of data field where everything that's related to how the first replicators could have developed, how the cell system develops, how the first error correction systems are, and what those involve. That fascinates me because any model that wants to deal with that early stage of life before evolution starts kicking in, will want to deal with it. And the fact remains that, as far as I know, 100% of the work on this issue is done by evolutionists. No anti-evolutionist does work in this field. And that's telling you by sweat equity who's actually interested in it to try to figure out what's going on.
You still haven't answered the question. Is the goal truth?
Yes. I want to know everything that ever happened, everything that actually happened, and only that would actually happen.
Let me talk a little bit. You're very articulate, but let me talk a little bit, okay? Okay, the goal is truth. The topic was creation versus evolution. Creation loves to talk about, hang on. Creation loves to talk about the origin of matter, origin of energy, origin of life. I 100% understand Erika saying, well, I'm a biologist. Well, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a paleontologist. I'm just an engineer.
Let's talk about origins.
Let me finish.
Let's talk about origins.
Let me finish. Okay. It's very convenient for someone to say, that's not my field. I don't want to talk about it. But she brought up abiogenesis. She's got a minor in biology. I just think she's looking for a safe space where she can debate things that are warm and comfy, instead of the questions that atheists, and I don't even know what your position are, the questions that atheists hate, they'd say, no, let's not even talk about the origins. Let's just talk about...
Oh, don't make this an atheism issue. Don't make this an atheism issue. This is just as much an issue for religionists as for atheists. Don't make it that. That's a false dichotomy.
The goal is truth.
Dedicated to theistic evolution called Biologos.
Let's talk. I'm fascinated. We shouldn't use the God term because that carries baggage. So let's try to figure out what we're talking about. Using just scientific data, you are contending that there is some supernatural, extra transcendent spurgle, one or more spurgles, that somehow is responsible for certain kinds of phenomenon that no natural process can take into account of. Is that correct?
No, not quite. I am saying the scientific data falsifies the premise that natural processes created matter, created energy, created life. I'm saying natural evidence. Wait, hold on.
No, I'm trying to get to your position, not the other one.
No, you asked me a question. I'm saying what we observe in nature shows us people make people, apes make apes. The fossils confirm that. I'm saying the natural evidence makes that the best explanation.
Okay, but when apes make apes, some of those apes are people who are making apes who are people. And when, say, catarrhines make catarrhines, some of those catarrhines are apes who make apes who are humans who makes humans. And when, say, simiiforms make simiiforms, some of those simiiforms are simiiforms who make catarrhines who are apes who make apes who are humans who make humans.
Yeah.
Why does this confirmation of the theory of evolution in your mind seem to be a contradiction of it?
Well, the point is very simple. I mean, you can throw out those words, and I'm not dismissing those words.
But you are.
I'm a simple guy, first of all. 8 billion people.
Yeah.
1 million apes.
Okay.
How many living ape men?
Yeah.
That's like asking how many living mammals are there?
0. I showed the slides from evolutionists. There
are 8.
But you lack a map of time, Bill. So you have a compressed time frame. But no. Well, what evidence would you accept? What would an ape man look like, and how would it differ from an Australopithecine?
Well, okay, we can get to the definitions of kinds.
Let's do that.
Okay, so if even if it has to be through in vitro, if one could produce an offspring with another, they're the same kind. I would say a kitten.
I asked you a specific question.
I'm getting to
and
it.
I don't think
I'm
you
getting
know
to
the
it.
answer to this because
I'm
zero
getting to it.
creationists think about it.
I'm
How
getting to
would an ape man look different from an Australopithecine? How would you tell them apart?
Well, to me, an Australopithecine was an ape, but where are the ape men? It's a simple question.
What would that?
What would an ape man look
Okay.
like? What features would it have that would allow you to tell it apart from an Australopithecine?
If a human, okay, I'm sure this isn't going to satisfy you because I'm sure of that. The 8 billion people could potentially interbreed with the other 7.9999 billion.
You're not answering the question, and I know why you're not answering the question. Because you have
It's
never
the burden's on
conceptualized
you,
this
my
problem.
friend. They don't
and no
exist.
creationist ever has.
Okay, let me jump in here for a second.
Do they exist?
The
in your
question:
opinion?
Do ape men exist? Yes, there are 8 billion of them because humans are just as much as an ape as they are a mammal, as they are a vertebrate, as they are eukaryotes.
Can you reproduce with an ape?
Yes, every single organism that I could reproduce with is an ape. There are no non-apes I could reproduce with.
Only the human apes you can reproduce with. And an ape is a name. It's a label. You can only produce with a 46 chromosome human.
Well, that actually
Out of
has been very well
curiosity,
studied,
Bill.
so maybe.
Wait. I want to know about Dapper Dino's dating life. Can you reproduce with something besides a human?
Well, I've never tried to, but the question there is that there is not actually terribly good research on that for ethical reasons. It's still an open question that likely won't be solved again for ethical reasons, whether or not humans are less genetically distinct from chimpanzees than horses are from donkeys. And they have the same basic problem with a mismatch in chromosome count that horses and donkeys do. And yet, despite this, creationists tend to think that donkeys and horses are in the same kind, even though they're farther apart than humans and chimpanzees. And since they can produce mules, it's still an open question as to whether or not humans are still genetically compatible enough with chimpanzees to make a sterile hybrid. Of course, no one really super wants to find out because, well, again, huge ethical implications in creating some kind of half-human, half-chimpanzee hybrid. What do you do with that?
We barely interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, so...
No, there are some questions that need to remain unanswered.
Yes.
I know you're talking about ethics, but do you think you could produce an offspring with a chimpanzee?
Do I think...
I'd say no.
If I were...
Exactly. That's the whole point.
But the thing is that that's still an open question.
Oh, I think you're
Bill,
hanging on.
Do you accept that speciation ever takes place?
Absolutely.
Then why is this an issue?
Then tell us what speciation events do you accept within the human holobaromon?
See, good for you. You're throwing things out there I've never heard of. I believe speciation.
You don't read creation literature?
What?
You don't read baromonology?
No, you're way smarter than me. Your IQ is probably 3 times mine.
This is your creationism.
Your knowledge.
Do you not read any of the baromonology work?
I'm very impressed by your knowledge. Believe me. Your wisdom, I question.
You don't read Todd Wood, Kavanaugh, Kurt Wise. You don't read their stuff.
No, I bow at your feet at your knowledge. Believe me. But your wisdom is lacking.
Why aren't you curious about your own creationism?
Why am I not curious about my creation?
What sources do you rely on, Bill?
Okay. The great Bob Dylan said you don't need to be a weatherman to know it's raining outside. You don't have to read every book by Todd Wood to know people make people, apes make apes. For emotional reasons, I'm sure you are clinging desperately to this.
No, here's a problem. Here's a problem, Bill. You're wading into an issue of systematics when you don't know anything about it and you don't realize that you don't know anything about it.
I know we're not related to apes. I know life doesn't come from non-life. I know matter and energy doesn't.
No, you believe that. You do not know that. You believe it. So I ask again.
Biogenesis.
I ask again. If you had a fossil,
everything we
of
see,
a perfect ape man.
Are we going to talk over?
Let me finish my question.
Let me finish
my question.
If
you have a perfect ape man, absolutely perfect in every possible.
All right. Hold on. Let me.
Okay.
Drink
your orange juice. Relax.
Look, how about this, Bill? Please tell me, not RJ. what anatomy, I don't care about where it would come from, but let's say that there were such a thing as an ape man. What anatomy would you expect from it? What would you expect?
I have no idea. The
Then
bird,
how do you know it doesn't
show me
exist?
they exist.
Look, if you said to me, Gringledukes don't exist, and I said, well, what is that? And you said, well, I don't know. Then how do I know that you know they don't exist?
Okay,
You have to know what something would be for it to exist to be able to say that you don't think it does. If you can't define what a thing would be if it existed, then when I say it does exist, you have no basis to reject the claim.
yes, I do. Humans, I don't know. My kids understand. And again, I don't doubt your IQs are through the roof. But look at the wisdom. Okay.
This is not a matter of IQ. It's a matter of laziness and inability to conceptualize your argument.
Okay.
Let's let Bill finish the statement.
Thank you very much. My kids were playing with plastic barn animals. They're playing away, and I said, did you know that the pig's mommy is a horse? My kids said, no, it's not, Daddy. I said, well, what's the pig's mom? They said, it's a pig. I says, well, we're going to send you to UC Berkeley, and they'll beat that out of you. It's obvious. Apes make apes, people make people, and you can get into all these things. Well, define to me what it is. Show me that they can interbreed. And Dapper, no offense, you're saying, well, that's not ethical. Well, it's not scientific either to believe that a chimpanzee can reproduce with an ape or a human. And you can get into the details. Well, what would it look like? And say, you don't know what it looks like. Show me where it is. Again, 8 billion people.
We do. I contend that Australopithecines are a perfect ape man.
So I do actually want to know something. So, Bill, do you think that if evolution were true, like the idea of common descent, universal common descent, so let's just imagine that that's true for the sake of this thought experiment.
Sure.
If that were true, do you think that any two organisms would be able to produce offspring together? If evolution were true?
I would think many would, but I believe that there could be speciation and genetic drift. But the whole field of zoology falsifies that.
Okay, but that's not my question.
Yes,
the question is,
I think there would be a lot, but not all.
Okay, so why is it that the current existence of two organisms which can't interbreed, and we'll just take for granted that they can't, is somehow an argument against their common descent when you just said that that in and of itself doesn't negate common descent?
I think there'd be a lot more swappage, if you want to say, if the theory of evolution was true, people could decide to go out on a date with a human, an Australopithecine, a chimp, a monkey, etc., and reproduce. I'm not saying you could reproduce with a frog, if you know what I'm getting at.
Why do you think that?
Yeah, have you read any geneticists that would back that claim up?
I have no idea. I've read about genetics.
Well, have you studied any of the genetics?
There you go. There you go. You're smarter than me. Let me finish. There is so much distinction between all the living kinds. I would say that if the theory of evolution was true, there would be much more swappage. Once again, there would be the ape man, perhaps an organism that could reproduce with an ape or a human.
Why? Who says that would be the case? Why would that be so?
A theoretical question.
Yeah, I know. And I would tell you that from what scientists know about the speciation process, expecting a hybridization with a form that's separated by common ancestry by millions of years.
Again,
the zygotic isolation mechanisms would have kicked in long before that.
Well, RJ, and again, I'm a simple guy, just an engineer. I enjoy science. The theory of evolution is stories and drawings. Show me the evidence. I see.
We do have the evidence. If you look at, and this is why I'm amazed that you've never bothered to read any of the creationist literature on baraminology. They are facing exactly the problem you don't want to think about, which is what exactly is the boundary layer of an alleged kind. And in case after case after case, including human evolution, they bog down at the boundary layers, or they have to flush data down the stream. So I would contend that if you were to fairly look at what the mechanisms of speciation are and apply them fairly to not only living organisms, but to the fossil record, you would find the connect the dots game you can't find the discontinuities that creationism keeps on demanding. But you never bother to look. You don't even read their own creationist literature on this.
I have a definition of kind.
Yeah, okay. How many kinds are there now? How many kinds are there now?
Hey.
Hi, guys. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, hi, Eric.
It's all right.
We've been trying to hold the ball here. We need to put it in your court.
Oh, my goodness. What are we talking about?
We're talking about kinds and speciation events and whether you can identify an ape man or not.
Well, I would like to define what a ape that with human-like features might look like. I suspect it would have a more defined jaw, a larger jaw, with a more pronounced face and nostrils. I suspect its arms would be longer than ours. It would have broader ribs. And most importantly, it would likely have a smaller brain and a more human-like pelvis, legs, and feet.
I would also like to add in a sort of rectangular-shaped palate and larger canine teeth. Does all that seem reasonable?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, guys.
You just got here.
Yeah, Erica, go ahead. What do you think an ape man would look like?
Yeah, I think any kind of ape man that you're looking for is going to have what we would generally consider. So basically what you do when you're looking at anthropological traits, right, is you establish, well, what are our most basal traits with regard to our last common ancestor that we're looking at. So here it would be the human chimp split. So it would be probably Sahelanthropus chidensis. And then you say, all right, well, what traits do anatomically modern humans have that this common ancestor didn't have? So what transition needs to occur? And then your perfect transitional, your ideal ape man would have a combination of both of those traits with a ratio that is 50-50. Now, obviously, you're not going to find something precisely 50-50 because you're not going to be able to empirically categorize these in such a cogent way, right? But I would maintain that as far as what we have now, between Africanus and habilis is going to be where you find your perfect ratio.
And no living ape man, right?
No, you wouldn't suspect.
That doesn't frustrate you.
No. Because the thing is
Bill doesn't allow fossil evidence to mean anything.
Excuse me, we have a super chat.
You're running.
Hold on, we have a super chat. For $2.99 reduce, which is what I call Australian dollars because that's what they should be called. And he says, more Dapper, Erica, and RJ, please. Where's Jackson?
Where is Jackson?
So right now, I would like to keep it to 6 if I can. I'm still hoping the standing will come in. However, if basically by 12:45 or so, I don't hear from standing, I think we will just open it up to having another person. And RJ, if you want to bring Jackson in, I would be A-okay with that.
I'll tell you, Bill Jackson's going to be the guy you want to talk to for a lot of your biochemical questions. I think he really knows his stuff.
And the genetics issue. On that, what would a ape man look like? We can also be predicting certain things about what genes that ape man would have.
It's your fantasy. You tell me.
I mean,
we can be absolutely certain they're going to have right off the bat the basal elements. They're all going to have homeobox genes. They're going to have bone morphological protein. They're going to have sonic hedgehog. But when we get down to the nitty gritty, we can even be anticipating some of the ALUs that would be operating around in there because that's a pseudo gene that's been knocking around in the primate genome before we get to the full blown hominid. So there's an awful lot that could be inferred genetically. What?
The only place they exist is in your mind. Where are they?
I'm sorry. Hold on. Are you saying that
the genes? I just mentioned genes.
And you keep dreaming about. Where are they? Where's the beef? That's
I remember. Here, let me give an example of where Bill is glitching up. If I'm insisting that there are no Buicks in the junkyard, don't I have to know what a Buick is supposed to look like? Otherwise, if somebody comes up to me with a part, recognize it as a Buick or not. So say you bring up a section of hood and it's got a B and a U and a C and a K written on it, but there's a hole where there's a couple spots missing in the middle. And this is a hood from a Buick. No, it says, no, that says Buck. That's not really a Buick. That's a Buck. What it goes down to is you don't allow there to be Buicks in the junkyard. and you can
Wrong.
never define
Wrong.
what you would accept as a Buick. We asked you
king of the
point
straw man,
blank,
RJ.
what would an ape man look like and how you could tell it from an Australopithecine, and you couldn't do it.
I would get a Chilton's manual. I don't know if they still make them. I have a few. I would go to my mechanic experts and say, hey, does this look like a Buick hood? And I would defer to expertise that it is a Buick.
Okay,
then why don't you defer to the anthropologists on the paleontology?
Show me the ape man. Say this is an
They
ape
do.
man.
Okay,
They don't
you
do it.
will
They
look.
admit with their own way. Wait, let me finish, RJ. I know it's hard for you to be patient. Settle down. Their own.
I know, I'm an
quotes.
annoying
used
jerk.
them yesterday.
I know.
Shh. You're very rude. Let's let other people talk. Yesterday, I showed quotes from evolution. He's a no Erika, that's for sure. I showed quotes where the evolutionists admit they are still looking for the ape man. Period.
All right, I want to jump in real quick with a super chat, and it's for $5 from Vandali 1998, who says, Bill, you said you think speciation happens. How does it work in your opinion?
Okay, suppose you have 1 million snails.
Okay.
And man decides, hey, let's build a freeway.
Okay.
The freeway splits the two populations in half. After several generations, people would say, hey, they're not interbreeding anymore. It's speciation. Now, often, and I talked about this yesterday with Erika, often it is not just because of genetics, but because of morphology. You could argue that a supermodel is a different species from me because she would not breed with me. But in vitro, it is possible. So speciation is where populations get split and don't interbreed, and it's a loss of genetic information if it were genetic. But I propose that in vitro, those two populations still could breed, but over time, their morphology could change to where they would not want to.
So do you think that there is no instance within your creationist framework in which organisms that do share a common ancestor have diverged sufficiently that they can no longer breed regardless of their lack of desire to do so?
Hopefully this will answer your question. Speciation is 100% true, but snails are still snails.
That didn't even attempt to answer the question.
Name a speciation event with an actual animal. Don't generic. Do you know, by your own investigation, any example that you accept as a speciation event in an actual organism?
I have heard of the snail example. I have heard the Grand Canyon example that there are.
So you've not studied this at all?
Very similar and don't interbreed. But in vitro, they could.
So would it be okay if I interjected here? Because I know I gather from our conversation last night that you're a big picture kind of guy. Actually,
I'm an evidence guy.
Yeah, but also you did say I'm a big picture kind of guy. You like the kind of macroscopic lens, and I get that. I can see where you're coming from. But I think from the perspective that we are coming from, or at least I can say that I'm coming from, is, like I said, when I define macroevolution in sort of the most simple terms as to what we see with our eyes, right? It's morphologic change through geologic time. You're not going to see any kind of macroevolution that you would desire right now because it doesn't happen that quickly. But when we look to the fossil record, like I showed in my presentation yesterday, I find it very compelling. But that the fact that you can lay out all of the hominid skulls that we have, that were all found in differing rock layers, all in the same continent, separated by time with minute morphologic change between them, and that you can do the same thing with tetrapods and whales and the reptile-mammal transition, my bad, is very parsimonious to me, especially in conjunction with the conversation we had about physics and radiometric dating. So when I look at the big picture with that, it's not, well, what about the common ancestor between, how are we going to link the synapsids and pelycosaurs with the therapsids? What comes in between the two of them? It's like, yes, that's an interesting question, and I would very much like to know the answer. Maybe some of our reptile mammal guys know the answer to that question. But for me, taking a step back and seeing all of these things working in conjunction leads to evolutionary theory as by far and away the most parsimonious.
Okay, well, there's data and there's interpretation of data. Suppose the United States Olympic team, they all died, they got buried, and in 200 years, people were looking at the skulls. You've got tiny skulls of the female gymnasts. You got the massive skulls of the human shot putters. People could interpret the data many ways, saying, wow, look at all the variation. Well, this one's a different kind from that one. There's tremendous variation. We even talked about that yesterday. I showed you the skulls of the dogs. They're both alive today, but you could look at them and say, wow, look at how one has changed into the other. So the data, interpretation of data are two different things. All the skulls you said yesterday, I'm not an expert on every skull there, but I'm sure that they could be classified as belonging to some ape kind and some human kind.
I would really,
different than adults, but they're still the same species. And
I would really challenge you to look just on this one as a personal challenge from me to you. If you would look at a bunch of as many as you can creationist interpretations and where they draw those lines. Any creationist you would consider an expert with regard to forensics in general, or just gross anatomy, because I found that they can't agree on where to draw the line, and I think that's very telling. And I would also point out that the same science, literally the exact same science that we use to determine, how a crime scene occurred or whatever in forensic anthropology is applied to cultural and biological anthropology and combined with the field of genetics. That's how we know that Neanderthals weren't humans, at least in the conditional, like we're part of the same subspecies, right? Because the difference is
sutures, teeth growth rate, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's biology combined with genetics.
Real quick, we have a super chat from the quarantine zone in Italy. So our thoughts, and Luca Medugno is stuck in quarantine. He could be arrested for going out of his house right now. So we really appreciate that we are providing you with something to do with your time, because I'm sure it is frustrating out there. But it says, a quick question for Bill. What's the unit of measure for entropy?
Wow, I know. I remember the symbol was delta S over delta T.
Be right back, guys. Hold on.
Okay.
It's been a while. I studied it in 1978.
Okay. So I think the reason it's being asked is because a lot of times we hear arguments about the laws of thermodynamics in some way invalidating evolution. And then there comes a question, if you don't know what entropy is, how can you say that it would invalidate anything?
Okay, I know what entropy is. I'm just saying I don't remember what the units are. Entropy is an increase in chaos, disorder, loss of available energy. Okay. Entropy,
only one of those is right, though.
What?
Only the loss of available energy is right. Chaos and disorder are human subjective accounts of the things that they see, but something could be extremely disordered from your subjective point of view, but still have extremely low entropy.
Well, it's a description.
Shannon energy, Shannon entropy.
So entropy is a measure of the amount of energy available in a system to do work, or it can also be described as the amount of available quantum microstates, which can result in the measured macro state of a system. Both of those are equivalent. And it's measured in units of joules per Kelvin. So I would recommend that any creationists out there, Bill included, really look into the thermodynamics before they try to use that argument, because it's very telling when even a high school level of thermodynamics isn't apparent in the creationist use of thermodynamics. And we have a $2 super chat from Vandalia 1998. What is and isn't an ape kind?
Well, wait, Dapper. Are you saying a system like our universe is increasing in available energy or decreasing in available energy?
I believe most of the evidence, virtually all the evidence, says that it is currently decreasing in available energy, although there is some question as to whether at cosmic scales the first law really does hold very true. But even if it doesn't, it still probably would result in a net loss of available energy to do work.
Ed, let's be honest and fair. We're all just seeking truth. Do you see that as a problem? And I'm not saying you're an atheist, but let's just say for an atheist. I'm not saying you are.
No.
That the universe is decreasing in available energy every second.
I mean, it would be a problem if I expect it to live for a few 100 trillion years, I guess, but I don't.
100 trillion years, yeah. Oh,
What about the
Erika?
atheist worldview?
I wanted to let you
Wait,
know
wait,
that before.
Hold on.
For the atheist worldview, isn't that a problem that we are decreasing in available energy?
I will repeat, I don't see why it would be, although I am not here to espouse atheism or any other belief or lack thereof in any kind of metaphysical reality.
But you brought up entropy.
Right. I didn't actually. That was brought up by
Okay, well, I'm sure you get my point. That is a very big problem of how did all the available energy originate when the second law of thermodynamics teaches that over time, available energy is decreasing.
No, it's holding steady or decreasing.
No. Total energy is holding steady. Available energy is decreasing.
Again, that is incorrect. An isolated system in which no work is being done and that is at thermodynamic equilibrium is also a system in which entropy will not increase.
We're having work done, though, in our universe.
Right. But there is no reason to suppose that work was always being done.
Okay, well, you can philosophize your way out of it, and I say that with respect, but I know you get my point.
I mean, that's basically.
I wanted to bring up.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to bring Erika up to speed on the systematics issue because before you came into the show, I was asking him specifically about creationist baraminology. And Bill is not familiar with creationist baraminology. He hasn't read any of their systematics works to realize the problem that they have dug themselves into.
Ooh, Bill, I would say I actually like I like this how you do this because I agree. I want to emphasize that I am saying this with respect because I find you a delightful person. But I would say I think you will be, as someone who wants to seek truth, I think you'll be immensely disappointed if you spend time looking into baraminology or how creationists are kind of working on separating into these sort of proto-kinds, these original ancestral species for their creation orchard. Because as someone who's not even, this isn't even my field, like I give myself credit, like I know a decent amount about systematics, but I'm certainly not an expert. But even I'm capable of looking into that and saying, but wait, that's not exactly going to work. It can only go back so far. You know what I mean? There should be a place to draw these clear lines, and they're incapable of doing so and frequently disagree. Now you could say, well, to be fair, a lot of conventional scientists as well do disagree on which species belongs where. But we're talking about a difference of scale here that is. I would encourage you to take the time and look into some of their research on its baraminology. I think it has an H in it. Yeah,
all available on low.
I told PD my answer, but I don't know if he wasn't listening or didn't choose to listen. Which are the two? I talked to John Stanford, the inventor of the gene gun, one of the world's leaders on genetics. And yeah, you can giggle. That's okay.
No, he isn't.
Okay, yeah, you can giggle all you want. He's got 40 patents, professor at Cornell.
He's not a leader in genetics. And if you actually think of John Stanford, they'll tell you.
Okay. All right. You're smarter than him. We'll just table that.
No. I'm telling you that you are bearing false witness if you imply that John Stanford is a major player in the genetic field. He is not. He's a plant biologist with some genetic things. He's done patents. He's done perfectly fine work within a narrow niche. But I know, and I think Erika knows as well, when she did fact checking on their work, that the primary source data field, which is why the regular geneticists up and down the line don't pay the slightest attention to Stanford. None.
Oh,
and for good reason. Entropy isn't even represented very well.
He knows more about genetics than you do.
I think, Bill, I would.
Wait.
Sorry, go ahead. You go first. I
got to read baraminology and all this other great stuff. I have a definition of a kind. If they can interbreed, even if it has to be in vitro, they're the same kind.
Okay, wait. I would like to make a recommendation because I know that I genuinely trust that you are going to look into some of this stuff. I really do think that you found it very interesting. So I'd suggest too, since you know Standing for Truth, he has a series of conversations with a cancer guy, an oncologist, or not an oncologist, an oncology researcher, guy named CRISPR, that they have these conversations on Standing for Truth's channel, and he goes very in depth into why Stanford is problematic from a genetics point of view, because he has fingers kind of in all of the fields as a cancer guy, because cancer is it impacts everybody and everything, unfortunately. But with regard to that last comment, do you think? I want to play a game here, kind of. I'm not trying to like trap you, I guess. But so, gorillas, orangutans, and chimps and bonobos. Do you think they're all the same kind?
I would defer. Can they interbreed?
They can't.
They're
now,
not the same kind.
So what about the fact that via in
I'm
vitro
sure they can interbreed. And again, I'm asking you.
Can what?
Can they interbreed in vitro?
They can, but so, and again, this is very tentative. I would encourage you to look into it. But the last research that I saw is that it is theoretically probable, not possible, but theoretically probable that humans and members of genus Pan can also interbreed with in vitro.
All right, we actually have a related super chat, and it's for Bill, and I want to make sure we get to it before he has to go, because that's in about 19 minutes, I think. Yeah. So the super chat is for $2 from Vandali 1998, and it is very related because it asks, what is and isn't an ape kind? Is there an ape kind? Is that even a kind?
The 12th time I've said this. An ape kind is that can interbreed with another ape, even if it's in vitro. They're the same kind.
What species would you put in that group?
What species? You tell me if they can interbreed, they're in the same kind.
So, Bill, I
don't know why I'm not getting through that. You at least see what my point is.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm picking up on what you're putting down, Bill. At least I think I do. I guess there's always the possibility that I'm not. But I'm getting what you're putting down. My sort of contra to that is that primates are like my thing. That's what I know best. And I can tell you that theoretically, right? Unfortunately, the research is looking very much like, and no one's going to test this in a lab, nor should they. So it's probably going to remain theoretical, but based off of other hybridization projects between organisms that are of the same genus and indeed of the same family, etc., it's very much looking like humans could produce some kind of offspring with members of genus Pan, so the bonobos and the chimpanzees, because the only thing preventing that from happening right now is the zona pellucida, which is the ring around the egg that essentially gate checks sperm from coming in or not. And so essentially very similar to how we have to do in vitro with say a Great Dane or a Chihuahua, because obviously that's not going to work out well for any party if that attempts to go down mechanistically. But it's doable. So let me ask you a question.
But you're saying it hasn't been done yet.
Yes, but I don't think it will. I hope that it doesn't get done, because I don't know what that would mean for that potential offspring. But let me ask you a theoretical. But
you get my point. You understand my point. I'm kind.
Yes, but here's my question, my kind of end question. If tomorrow we ran this in a lab and we did prove we artificially inseminated either a chimpanzee or a human with the opposing's relevant gametes, and we got viable offspring, I have no idea what that would look like or whether or not it would even actually make it through the pregnancy. But let's say it did. Would you concede that they are the same kind?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's fair enough.
That is fair. That's
following the evidence. And
so actually, speaking of following the evidence, there was something that I noticed in a debate, and I'm sorry, I'm referencing an older debate, but a debate was done a fair while ago. Snake was, you were debating, I believe Snake was right, who I think is in the chat, by the way. And he brought up that there were dozens of known definite not bird dinosaurs who had feathers. You said that you would look into it, but then in a later debate, you seem not to have. Have you looked into that yet?
No, I have not.
Okay. Why not? There are about 50 genera with direct evidence for feathers in non-avian dinosaurs.
35.
There's only 35? I thought it was a bit higher than that. I thought there were a few more.
Well, there's a lot of genera that can be presumed to probably have had feathers because they're taxonomically close to the ones that we know have feathers. But the list that I compiled for the new are literally restricted only to those that we absolutely know by the direct fossil representation that they have feathers, and there are 35 genera of those.
So it was a big part of your argument, at least at that point. And I suspect that if you did, in fact, want to have the discussion about birds and dinosaurs with me, which, again, I'm very open to, we can do it on Standing for Truth channel or Modern Day Debate or here, whatever you want. But it just seems like that was a big part of an argument for multiple debates.
Are they living?
So your answer to why you didn't look it up is because the particular fossil forms that you requested as fossil forms are fossil forms. That's your response.
I didn't look into it, and okay. I apologize. I'm a bad person.
I didn't say that you're a bad person, okay. But it's puzzling to me that you say that you'll look into things, but I have seen some evidence that that is not always the case, and I'm stating that I think I'm putting it a bit mildly, but I've heard you say a lot, I will look into it, but then I watch another debate with you, and there's no evidence that you have looked into it.
Okay, please forgive me. I'm a bad person. I have read up on dinosaur feathers and fossils. I used some quotes yesterday with Erika, and many of these are found in China. You would agree? Many of these are later falsified. Would you agree?
No, not many. A few.
What are your technical citations
example
in the
of that,
falsified
please?
ones? Name them. And if you bring up Archaeoraptor, do note that was said to be fake from the beginning.
I can't do it by name, and I apologize for that.
All right, so Bill, what generally happens with faked fossils?
Archaeoraptor is the only big one that was a fake.
Right, it's the only
and neither
one.
one of the pieces were fake, only Chimera.
Right,
okay, what does Alan Fiducia say about this?
He says that
let's talk about Alan Fiducia. How many of his books have you read?
I have not read any of his books. I've seen his quoted referenced articles. I've read his some of his articles online. Now, what's the title of the article? I don't know.
So what's his position on so what's Fiducia's position on where birds came from?
Well, as I recollect, he is not saying that they came from dinosaurs.
That's correct, but he does say they come from fungi.
But he has said where he thinks they come from. Where does he think they come from? Since you are only apparently knowing what Fiducia said by secondary quote, mine.
Well, again, I'm appealing to him that he's an evolutionist and he disputes. And Erika talked about creationists disagree on kinds.
Why can't you just say you don't know because you've never read Fiducia?
Let me finish. Evolutionists, and it's good.
No,
it's
hold on.
Evolutionists
I would like you to directly answer this question. This is a very direct question. If you know the answer, there's no reason to go anywhere else. Where does Alan Fiducia think birds came from? I would like you to give me the name of a group of animals he thinks that it comes from. And if you cannot do that, please simply say that you don't know.
Well, first, my point is evolutionists disagree, right?
I don't care about that. Please, no, I'm gonna mute you if you're gonna do that again. I'm not kidding, Bill. You need to answer this question. It's a very direct question. You're being extremely impolite right now. Please answer this question that I'm about to rephrase now, I believe, for at least the third or fourth time. Alan Fiducia, I agree with you, does not think that birds are dinosaurs. However, he does think they belong to another group. What group does Alan Fiducia think that birds belong to that isn't dinosaurs?
I am guessing. Okay. I read about him years ago. I would say a former reptile.
You are correct. He thinks that they are pseudosuchians, which basically means that birds are more or less crocodiles. Do you find that a more plausible or a less plausible idea than that birds are related to dinosaurs?
Equal.
Well, then why are you appealing to this man who has ideas that are just as implausible according to you?
Because Erika made a good point. She said, hey, creationists disagree on kinds, and I have no reason to doubt that. I'm saying, hey, evolutionists disagree on dinosaur birds. That was my point.
You've managed to pull out one paleoornithologist who, by the way, also thinks, basically, pretty much all of his students have abandoned the idea because there's essentially no evidence for it. Yeah. And Alan Fiducia has been pushed so far.
Bill's a secondary source addict.
Well, yeah. But
that hurt my feelings.
Can I pop in for just a second?
Oh, but it's true.
Erika, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is quite interesting because I've read a big proponent of Alan Fiducia's work tends to be like Answers in Genesis and ICR and Creation.com. And they tend to, I'm not a big fan of those guys because I at least from the sources that I've checked, they tend to do a bit of quote mining. But I will say very definitively that they, as of my last check, which was about 2 weeks ago, they say that all of these fossils, like the ones that I showed in my presentation yesterday, that are very clearly feathers, are simply collagen. And when I see that, when I saw that for the first time, I thought, well, that's quite strange because I could have sworn the other day the new paper came out where they actually gleaned pigment from these feathers and were capable of telling what color these organisms were.
Mm-hmm.
Which is true, and you couldn't do that biochemically. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. I'm not a biochemist, but I know enough about biochemistry to know that collagen represents quite differently than pigment does.
And actually, we have an interesting question from the audience that I wanted to get into. It was Bill. Is Velociraptor, one of the main antagonists from Jurassic Park, is that a dinosaur?
You're asking me?
Yeah. Would you call that a dinosaur?
My understanding, again, I'm an honest guy, dinosaurs are defined as land animals, so I would say Velociraptor was not.
Well, okay. Velociraptor was not a land animal?
Okay, you're playing these pop quizzes, which is good. Give me 1 minute. Okay. 1 minute.
Go Google the animal. I mean, it's...
Okay.
Yeah, Google, quick Google search. So from what I gather, and Erika, you can tell because you were in the debate and I only came in quite a ways down the road. It sounds like Bill was doing an awful lot of secondary quote mining in his debate, with putting up stuff of what people say, and Fiducia being an example of that. If you don't know what Fiducia actually said, but only what it was in a quote mine, you have not read Fiducia in a source methods direction. You are relying on somebody's parsing of Fiducia for your position, and that's a dangerous slippery slide to go on, and is incompetent at this point of view.
Okay, well, 1 minute. This is what I feel is incompetent. I feel it is incompetent to believe scales became feathers, legs became wings. Please explain to me. Please show me how a leg becomes a wing. Cold-blooded becomes warm-blooded.
Oh,
solid bones become hollow bones. Hind legs become perching feet.
Tell me the difference on Archaeopteryx wing.
The slowest metabolism becomes the fastest metabolism. Please explain it to me. Give me the evidence of a leg becoming a wing, a scale becoming a feather, solid bones becoming hollow. Or the respiratory system.
Okay.
How birds respirate, right?
So you've asked about, I don't know, 7 or 8 questions.
May I make
you guys are looking at a fossil and saying it's a dinosaur fossil. I'm saying, how does a leg become a wing?
May I make a quick suggestion?
Become a feather. Is that a fair question?
Hold on, Bill. Let's let Erika.
We want to answer.
Yeah, Bill, those are all fair questions.
Thank
and
you,
I think that a great way of doing this would be to kind of, however, in whatever order you would like, each of us can try to answer one of those to the best of our ability, because I know everyone's chomping at the bit. So RJ, is it cool with you, Bill?
How does the reptile bellows respiratory system evolve?
Oh, Bill, I think we might have lost you there. Bill, are you there?
Oh yeah, he may also be at his time frame here because it's 12:58, and he said he had to leave at 1.
Oh, well,
yeah,
we'll
want to be. To be fair, we should have a thing where Bill comes in. We can have a time arrangement to discuss this, because every one of those things we now know so much about the cardiovascular and respiratory system of dinosaurs that we didn't know even 5 or 10 years ago. I in both Slam Dunk.
Neslik just asked if he could come in.
Oh, yeah. Neslik, where do you? Oh, yeah. I'm on Twitter with you.
Let me go grab some iced tea. My orange juice is dead. I'll be back in a second.
Okay, I'm gonna grab that.
It was already dead.
I'm gonna grab that link. Oh, and there's Bill dropped. Sorry. Okay, I do want to say, I do hope that there was just some kind of technical problem there. I don't think that Bill rage quit.
I don't think he rage quit, but
yeah,
I hope he comes back.
I do too.
An internet issue or a dead laptop battery.
I will say though, it was frustratingly difficult to get to answer a question directly. And it.
I think almost the best way to do this is to let Bill, because obviously we're all chomping at the bit. So if he comes back, I think almost the best way to do it would be to just let everyone go one at a time.
Yeah.
And once we've reached either an impasse or an agreement, call it and move to the next question.
By the way, Bill's channel is linked in the description. Go check it out. I will not say that it has, huge amounts of content, but Bill does tend to upload, his debates. He every once in a while does a little interview or something, and he'll have something up there. So do subscribe. However, if you do subscribe, be respectful and do not harass him in the comments. Disagree, but please refrain from any kind of name calling or anything like that, because that only muddies the water. It only turns people off from listening to new ideas.
Yeah, I think too. I mean, the best kind of conversations that come out of these are the ones where everybody's genuinely just trying to share what they know, and ask questions about what they don't. So I mean, I really do think Bill wants to know what's up. I think that I'm hoping that his not searching for unfeathered dinosaurs and things like that is just because he's busy. But I get the vibe that he wants to know what's up, which is why we're here, so we can discuss what's up.
And I mean, look.
Bill's here. Bill's here, Dapper D.
Bill's back. Oh, Bill, we
got you, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Are you okay?
Absolutely. My laptop died, and I apologize for that.
That's what I thought.
Oh, and
I'm sorry. I don't think I ran. No, I learn more from people I disagree with, and so I don't mind talking with you guys. I would never run. So
I wouldn't think so, Bill. I wouldn't think so.
The first thing I said when you cut out was, look, I don't think that Bill just ran away. I think he had technical problems.
Rage quit.
Right, yeah. That was the first thing I said. I was like, I don't think Bill rage quit. Bill is he's a much too...
Yeah, neither did I. We know you're on time.
Right.
Hey, Bill, I thought it was your lovely dog that made you ran across.
I had a hamburger here, and I had to put her in her cage.
Oh, no. Poor pupper.
So she had the best life of anyone in this debate. Don't worry about her.
That's probably true.
Since we know that we're coming up on your hard limit where you have to go get someone from the airport, and I definitely don't want to interrupt that, because
I'll give you 10 more minutes because I cut out.
Well, what I was saying is that we had been thinking that what might be a good idea is if we could have some kind of discussion with a format where you can ask one of these questions at a time, and then someone can give as much of an explanation as they have for it, and then we can do any follow-ups that we need to on that question. And then once we feel like there's nothing more we can do there, perhaps we could go on to another question. And also, we have a $1.99 super chat from Eric Rittaler. How does Bill, I don't know why I just did that. How does Bill explain the Chickenosaurus? I don't know if you're aware of Bill Bacher's Chickenosaurus idea. Are you?
No, but I love chicken.
I do too. Although whenever anyone asks me what my favorite dinosaur is, my answer is always...
Bacher's a Lutheran minister, by the way.
So Bacher's idea is basically... it's well known that many of the genetic pathways that will result in embryonic development of a more basal tetrapod form are in birds. And so then there is and I guess we have, that's not a velociraptor. That's going to be a Deinonychus.
And the Dakotaraptor.
Oh, is it Dakotaraptor? Oh, where's the downturned?
Well, Deinonychus is velociraptor. It's called that in the movie for bad reasons.
Right, but anyway, so
that looks like Utah Raptor, probably.
I thought it was Utah Raptor.
It looks like it's the size of Utah Raptor, but it has the skull of a Deinonychus, which
those are the big.
The skull of Utah Raptor hasn't been well known until recently. So, anyway, so Bacher's idea is basically if we tweak these essentially just regulatory genes that help regulate things like cell growth, apoptosis, and things like that in embryo. We know that in many cases we can recover essentially dinosaur traits, including teeth and a more dinosaurian snout where the premaxilla doesn't dominate the entire length of the jaw. we have good reason to think that we can get the 3 digits of birds to not fuse and in fact to grow claws. We know exactly which genes are responsible for the foreshortening of the tail into a picostyle, and we could knock those out. And essentially, if you did that, then his contention is what you would get would essentially be morphologically, I mean, a tiny version of what you're looking at on the screen.
Well, and I know I won't get it. What I would like is an explanation of how a leg became a wing, a scale became a feather, the respiratory system. Would you agree? And again, we're not.
Well,
You're repeating the mantras again.
Would you agree the respiratory system of a reptile is extremely different than the respiratory system of a bird?
It depends on the reptile.
But it's
Depends on
not
which
extremely
reptile you're
different
talking
from a respiratory system of a dinosaur.
Right.
We're talking about birds and reptiles.
But they are specifically the kind of
but the dinosaurs are in between. That the differences between bird and dinosaur are very trivial. Have you been following any of the technical literature in the last 20 years on the respiratory systems, the air sacs, and all of the stuff that's been determined by the paleontology? Have you noticed any of that?
Okay. Tell me how the bellows system with lungs of a reptile became an air sac system with bypassing. Just give me the ABC.
That one is a little stage by stage because there's a whole technical literature on that, of the development of those respiratory systems and how they generate out of reptilian forms. By the time we get to dinosaurs, we already have a functionally avian style respiratory system.
Now, there's an identifiably Utah
So
raptor.
the birds don't have to invent a new respiratory system whole cloth. They're just inheriting their dinosaurian system. This is in the literature.
Somehow you got to get from one to air sac.
Real quick, we have a super chat from someone who has to go pretty soon, and it's a quick question.
Dinosaurs had air sacs in their lung system.
Even
Been known for years.
Hold on a second, guys. I have a real quick question that's paid to have asked to Erika, and he has to leave soon. So I have to leave for work soon. This is from Vandalia, 1998 for $5. I have to leave for work soon because people still want their Big Macs. But Erika, I was wondering if your trip was delayed or canceled.
Oh my God, that's a question that is going to take up the rest of Bill's time. Honestly,
Okay.
I have no idea what's going on as of right this second. I'm supposed to leave on Wednesday. I've talked to my parents and my field site manager, and we're both. My supervisors disagree, but my field site manager on the ground in Malaysia and my parents are both who are in the States. We're all looking at the UK and how it's probably going to be like Italy, and saying, well, I need to get out of Dodge from here. Just because you should see it, guys. It's a mess. The UK is a mess right now. At least here in London, it is.
So right now, up in the air.
Pardon me.
Up in the air is basically the conclusion.
Up in the air, yeah. If I can get there, I'm planning on going on Wednesday. But the odds of me actually making it there, getting a visa on arrival, and getting to my field site, it's a 50-50 shot.
Okay. Well, good luck. I know that this has been a lot of work.
Take care.
Yeah. Thanks. Who knows what's going to happen?
Bill, are you aware of the situation?
What situation?
Oh, with
flight? I don't know about Erika's flight.
Oh, Erika's trying to get her master's research done for her thesis, right?
Yeah, Bill, I'm supposed to. So my research has been It's been set in stone for about 4 months, about where I'm supposed to go and meet Nadine Rupert. She works on the pigtailed macaque species over in Malaysia, and I've been, this has been planned for quite some time. I've done I read 70 papers for a literature review in a very short amount of time. And then coronavirus happened, so I don't know that I'm going to be able to actually get there. So we'll see what happens.
So yeah, it's messing with everybody's plans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sucks.
Keep us posted, kid.
I will.
Yeah. And hey, if you don't,
Bill, definitely set up a time so we can continue this conversation, and we don't have to worry about you having to go to airports.
And
yes,
really,
Bill, yes, I would. If you would be at all willing. And the thing is I almost think that we ought to get Standing for Truth or someone in here. So, because I know it's kind of 5 against 1.
I've been trying to get Standing in. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Oh, I don't care about numbers. I'd love talking with Erika, but I know, in my opinion, TD is interrupting, brings up minute points, and avoids the big questions. It's not as pleasant talking with you. You're a genius. I give you the credit for that. But it's not a discussion. You just want to hear yourself talk, in my opinion. and reference obtuse facts. But anyways,
Okay.
I would just love
No,
to
it's
hear
not
an
obtuse
explanation
facts.
of how the
I'm
rest
trying
of
to
the
get
world
you to address the
evolved.
data
if I
bird.
could. Sorry,
being
I was
honest.
just trying to get in. It can be a bit unruly at times. I would like you to tell me what facts are obtuse, though.
Okay, I brought up origin of life, origin of matter, origin of energy, lack of living ape men.
We are apes.
When birds were brought up, I would love to hear an explanation. And again, I'm an engineer. Bear with me. I'm not a philosopher. A lot of this is philosophy of, well, we think this happened. We suppose that happened. And people say, oh, a lot of creationists disagree. Well, evolutionists disagree too, as we talked about. So I'm just looking for empirical evidence of how a respiratory system of a bird evolved from the respiratory system of a reptile. Legs became wings, scales became feathers. Again,
And
Okay.
we'll expect you to work out
Can I?
empiricism.
what you expect.
Hold on.
The next time we talk.
I have
Okay.
a proposal. Bill, why don't you type these questions that you have up? I'm pretty sure you already have them on your slideshow, so you can just copy paste them. Send them to me in an email so that I have the list, and we can have you on at a later date and time, and we can go through these questions, because I mean, I think you would realize that we're coming up against your hard limit, and we don't have time to even go into one of them, really, because each one of those, I think even you would say, was a pretty big topic, especially since your point is basically that it's such a hard thing to do that it's essentially impossible. So would that be something that you would be interested in?
I'm going to just say maybe. I'll debate Erika again, but I don't like interruption contests. I don't like scattering around all over the place.
Well,
I like to stick to one point and discuss it.
Right, that's what I'm proposing that we do.
So
I'm proposing that rather than have a thing where we can scatter into the Big Bang or thermodynamics or why it is or isn't that there aren't certain organisms around, you can send me your list of questions specifically about bird
doing it right now.
transitions, and then thank you, and then we can just have a discussion. We don't even have to frame it like a debate. We can have I suppose, but we can have a discussion about those specific topics in the order that you would prefer to have them.
I would be happy to help moderate or whatever. Bill, I would love if you would be willing to have me. I would love to have another discussion, another juncture. I really did have a great time last night.
Yeah, that was fun.
I tend to try and defer to people who know more than me when it comes to subjects that I don't know very well. For instance, like the bird to dinosaur or dinosaur to bird, my bad, transition. I would defer to Dapper Dino for that, or RJ. Because that's just not my field, you know? So if you want, for those questions, I would recommend, I mean, I can vouch for either of these guys. They're, you know, one-on-one tends to be a lot easier, I think, than when everybody's in a group, because everyone's so eager. I know I'm guilty of this. Everyone is so eager to get their point in. But I would be happy to help moderate or whatever, if you guys need help with that. Or if you want to do it at all. Anyways.
No, I love discussions, but if someone says, oh, well, have you read the article by Smith? And no, I haven't read the article. Well, I guess that proves that I would be wrong. But anyway, I love discussions. I love polite, respectful exchanges.
Okay, can I jump in for a moment?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I want to ask the question about what I'm screen sharing right now. First thing to point out, asking for an ape man is like asking for a dog chihuahua thing, so it makes no sense. So anyway, but what I'm showing here is like a Utah, or I think a Utah raptor, I think, right?
It's Utah raptor, yeah. It's the Utah raptor with the new dentary material included.
Yeah, so Bill, do you think that this is a bird or a dinosaur?
One?
The one that's on screen.
I would need to know the DNA.
What? The DNA?
That sure looks like a dinosaur to me.
Yeah.
It is?
Be right back, guys.
Here's the thing. Fiducia.
It looks like a drawing.
Yeah, it's a skeleton. Yeah, but
a drawing.
Fiducia would disagree with you. He says that it's a bird. He says that all menoraptors are birds. So citing Fiducia doesn't really help your case at all.
But he makes the case that evolutionists disagree, right? That was my point.
Yes,
Hey
me
guys,
wrong.
real fast, I gotta go. It's kind of a quick deal. I have someone at the door. If I can't jump back in, I would love to have a conversation at another juncture or moderate at a greater length. RJ, next time you're having Evolution Hour, I'd love to be a part of it. Just let me know. Keep me in the loop. I'm sorry, guys.
All right.
Okay, I have to go too. I gotta get to LAX.
All right. Well, good luck getting to LA. Oh, I hear it's really empty now, so you should be good, right?
Well, I'll be fine. But
Okay.
thank you very much.
All
I appreciate the passion, TD. We disagree, but I love your zeal, passion, and I'm sure you're a fine human being. I mean that.
Right.
We
Well,
disagree.
thank you.
And if you send me that email, I don't know if you already have, but if you do, I will make sure to get back to you on that.
I put a lot of stuff in the positive or private chat.
Okay. I will take a look at that too.
All right.
As
Thank
did
you, guys.
Thank you much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh, bye, Bill.
God bless Italy.
Oh, yes.
I mean that.
Needs it.
If I may, one thing to say to Bill, like look up Sharon Glotzer's works. Her work shows that the entropy can even increase order.
Oh, it localized in an open system.
No,
absolutely, but not in a closed system.
No, the process of entropy directly increases order according to her work, or at least in some cases it does. So entropy is not the same as disorder.
You mean entropy? I think you said enthalpy.
No, entropy. Sorry
Right.
for my accent. Sorry for my accent.
No.
It's entropy with an R.
Okay. We'll appreciate it, and have a good day.
All right. And I am right now making sure that I save Bill's questions because I want that to be something that we can actually go through. And hey, even if we can't set up a discussion, it could be the kind of thing that can turn into
they're all excellent
video.
questions, and the science
they are.
literature on them is also interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that Bill is definitely right that these are questions that need to be answered, and they're not simple questions. I mean, especially if you look at modern reptiles, right, and you look at modern birds, there does seem to be a pretty big gulf between them.
Yeah.
Now, that's in part because none of them are particularly closely related to each other, because, it's been a very long time, but I do want these to all be addressed to the maximum amount that we can.
Yeah.
We got even more questions coming in. Bill, my goodness, you're making me do a lot of work here.
I'm
All
just
the talking.
seeking knowledge.
The earliest birds, by the way, modern ornithines, are actually showing up in Australia
Are they?
and Antarctica. I was just attending a lecture on that from a dinosaur paleontologist at EWU last week.
I suppose it helps when you can
Interesting.
fly. How did birds learn to migrate? Okay.
I think I sorry, got to go, but instinct I think is a big problem for the atheist worldview.
Okay.
But
No, it isn't. But anyway,
Yeah.
how did the bird learn how to migrate? TD, before I go.
I don't think we have time for that.
I'm not well read on that.
Obviously, God told them so.
RJ.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, RJ. I'm sorry, TD.
yeah.
How did the bristle-thighed curlew know how to migrate 7,000 miles across the ocean to go to Fiji?
Oh, I haven't studied that. I think saying a magic god did it explains any of it.
We will look into it.
You're begging the question.
No, I'm not begging a question. You seem to treat everything as a dichotomy. How many of the people
won't answer it, and I
involved in
respect that.
migration research do you claim are atheists?
I respect that you won't answer my question and try to be condescending.
I say I don't know the
Believe
answer
me.
to it. You never admit that you don't know the answer to things that you haven't really thought through, and that's one of the things that I find rather smug about you.
Oh, I'm the most humble person you'll ever meet. I'm just asking for the evidence.
Yes,
Information.
oozing humility. Yeah, okay.
Okay, well,
Hey,
all right, I gotta go. I'm not gonna.
All right.
Yeah, we're gonna leave it on friendly terms, Bill. Thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you, Dapper.
The airport,
Thank you,
pick the person
TD.
up and yeah.
Drive safely. I hope everything works out. Stay safe out there. Don't
too.
touch your face.
Okay,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Fortunately, the dogs apparently are immune to coronavirus, so that's
Yes. Although we're trying to avoid saying that word too much because YouTube doesn't like it very much.
That's
they get
hot
triggered
steaming pile of
with it.
monetization right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I put a little caveat it into his questions in the live chat or the internal chat. Yes, his questions are excellent questions. I'd like to have him explain what evidence would need to look like to persuade him of the answer.
Yes,
I don't think he can ever do that.
I would also like that to be a question. I don't want to say too much about what he would or wouldn't do without him here, but I would say that it was essentially impossible to get out of him what he would expect an ape man to be, which makes it very hard to understand why he says there aren't any when he wouldn't recognize one if it came to him.
And one thing I can tell you from my research of anti-evolutionism, he's not unusual. 100% of anti-evolutionists cannot think through that question. This is a universal diagnostic feature of anti-evolutionism.
Yeah.
Also, like many
that's kind of a pattern.
Many of his questions are very interesting by themselves. Like, how did like feathers form? But here's the thing: like many of these traits are shared by dinosaurs, non-bird dinosaurs. Like he points to how did he the reptilian egg evolved into the bird egg, but dinosaurs had calcified eggs too.
Yeah.
You know what? There's another creationist in the chat. Do we want to bring another creationist in to try and make his point?
Oh, I have no problem with it. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's Anthony Maurice.
All right.
Yeah, I just told him the spam.
Yeah, if you want to actually come in and discuss these things rather than just making assertions in the chat,
yeah.
Why don't you send
the thing about Bill is that it looks like he's a relatively superficial secondary quote miner person. That he, by his own admission, he really doesn't read the creationist literature that's been dealt with on baraminology and all the rest, and he just basically is a quote mine gotcha person, and he thinks that's an argument.
You know, I'm gonna type into the chat real quick. So we're gonna get ready for the clickety clackety noises. You guys ready?
Yeah, sure. Anyway, I duly apologize. I'm an arrogant bastard. I freely admit to it. I'm an annoying person, so I can't. I apologize in advance on that. You know, that's my nature. It's my instinct.
Yeah, I was honestly trying not to interrupt the entire time. I think he might have gotten me confused a few, RJ.
I think at one point he did, yeah. But you know, you're both new to him. So, by the way, that's a standing offer to Anthony Maurice. If you want to come in and have an actual discussion, that's great. But it means spamming it. We're not. I don't want to necessarily say spamming because I'm not sure whether or not it is. But my mods will let me know after the fact, I'm sure.
He's been saying this a while. He's been going on about Genesis.
If you have like, here's the thing, right? One of the things that bothers me is that creationists frequently want to set up a debate that is mistitled. If you want to talk about abiogenesis, put that in the title of the debate, because what it does is it means that basically, if you're going to go outside of evolution to something else, and that's the title of the debate, I don't want to necessarily say you're being dishonest, because maybe as a creationist, you don't really know the difference, but it comes across as being dishonest to most other people who are going to watch it. Because the problem is, it's like I said earlier, is the Magna Carta important to the Battle of Gettysburg? Well, I guess, yeah, technically.
To be fair, it doesn't surprise me, because in their worldview, specifically in the young earth creationist apologetics that Bill comes from, origins or bust is the core linchpin, and they can never disconnect that from all of that data field. It's just absolutely the basal line on it. So it doesn't surprise me at all where they go on this stuff. Right. And the same thing happens over in intelligent design land too.
Yeah, but the thing that bugs me is, like, look, people will have a debate about abiogenesis if you want to have that. There are people who will have that debate. Title it creationism versus abiogenesis. Or if you want to have the Big Bang discussion, title your debate creationism versus the Big Bang.
Truth in packaging.
Right. I know of plenty of people. I know personally some people who would probably be willing to have the debate creationism versus the Big Bang. But if
so
they went
Erika,
into
poor
that-
Erika, she wants to discuss biology and primates because that's her area, and suddenly she's having to discuss nucleotides and something that she has not an experience in.
That episode, like I remember when P.G. Myers talked to like a bunch of creationists, and they they talked about embryology, and P.G. Myers went, "Oh, I am an embryologist," and then they went straight to geology after that.
Well, I will say, I think that this lack of ability to recognize that people have areas and that they perhaps shouldn't be trusted to speak outside of them extensively is a big problem in creationism in general. For instance, if you look at the people who give talks at Answers in Genesis, because they have like weekly conferences there, it's very frequently someone who is not someone who's actually an expert in the field. So, for instance, they'll trot out Georgia Purdom to talk about
I was literally thinking of her on geology.
Right, but then they'll drag out Andrew Snelling or whatever is, however you pronounce it. Snelling, right?
Yeah, Snelling.
I'm probably trying to make it too German or something. So they'll trot out Andrew Snelling and they'll say, "Oh, hey, why don't you give a talk about speciation?" I was like, well. It's not like he's a good geologist, but you should at least have him give the talk about geology. And why?
Geology, yeah. He fails even in that department. That's fascinating.
Right. But then you have, you trot out Georgia Purdom, and I've watched her give this speech, and she goes on to this whole speech about how Noah's flood is apparent in geology. And it's like, I guess I can't fault you too much because I don't know how much of this is ridiculous. And I think that actually might be part of the reason they do it. Is it's like, oh, well, Georgia can probably keep a straight face while she tells all of these blatant lies.
Well,
maybe
also the camera ready. That very few of the fact claimants in anti-evolutionism generally are necessarily good at talking extemporaneously. And the fact that Purdom is camera friendly, she is kind of a point person. Snelling is relatively limited in this field. Kurt Wise has done a little bit. So in part, it's just the telegenic qualities that have acted as a selection pressure.
Someone said in the live chat, Kent is right about most of what he talks about.
Oh. Who said
Kent Hovind? No.
Yeah.
That immediately puts up.
Unidentified. Oh,
yeah.
Unidentified Leviathan.
Yeah.
I encourage you, go through a Kent Hovind video. Find the first fact that he claims is a fact.
And try to track it down.
Track it down, research it, see if it's actually true. And then do the same thing. And only do one video. I'm not saying, go through his entire 50-hour seminar series.
Well, he repeats himself so often, you'll pick off an awful lot. There's not a great deal of originality in a Kent Hovind debate.
That's true.
Except for the
lecture.
Well, except for the Trilobite claim.
Well,
that is pretty original.
Have you heard his Trilobite claim, RJ?
Oh, no, what's his latest on that? What's his bid on Trilobite?
It's a very old claim, actually, but still.
Well, see, I don't remember having heard it when I was younger, and in fact, an unironic Hovind fan, whereas I am now a very ironic Hovind fan.
My apologies.
Well,
condolences.
Hey, you know what? If you want to hear that story, it's on my very first episode of Leaving Young Earth Creationism, because it was about me. But his claim about trilobites is that they may in fact still be alive in the form of giant benthic isopods.
Oh, yeah. There again, you can anticipate that he's been trawling again, because that's not an original claim to him. It's one of the things that's been circulating around in the lower echelon of fringe creationism. And every once in a while, you'll get some lower level creationists who will use that. And Kant is a bottom feeder. He has no ability to tell up from down.
And the thing that bugs me the most about it is that it's an obviously absurd claim. Like, okay, what are the anatomical commonalities between these organisms?
Yeah, I think we referenced that matter in the weird living trilobite claim. There's a trilobite paleontologist who has a website posting where he goes into all that stuff, and I think I reference it in the new book.
Yeah, you would be closer to right to say that horseshoe crabs are living trilobites. They're closer anatomically, they're closer phylogenetically, or not cladistically in the systematics.
Although technically speaking, the closest relatives we would have today to horseshoe crabs are spiders and scorpions.
Yeah, although I I don't know. I saw like about an article a few months back that says that trilobites are closer to like mandibulates.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, look, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment. However, whenever there's
ironically,
I think that position among chelicerates is like mostly conservative, like the most conservative.
It is.
That ultimately, paleogenomics is going to be weighing in. There's only a matter of time before they learn enough about all the cis-regulatory cascades that they can start effectively retro-engineering trilobites. This may not happen in my lifetime, but it's only a matter of time.
I mean, that would be pretty awesome, and I hope that that's something that we can get to. Ordovician Park, just a bunch of little arthropods crawling out of a pool.
Back to Kent Hovind and
welcome to that Florian Park.
Welcome to Cambrian Park.
I want to hear what RJ has to say about Kent's thing.
Yeah, most of Kent is riffed off of Walt Brown. So if you download Walt Brown's apologetic stuff, most of which was done by the early 2000s, and he's on a website, so all of it's freely available. That's 90% of Kent Hovind right there. That's his go-to oracle. So virtually all of the secondary source claims that he may cite a primary source in the slide, but he got it from Walt Brown usually. I found in other cases, of course, he riffed off of Harun Yahya, the Islamic creationist. He just on Alan Fiducia, by the way, he was shamelessly ripping off an entire website posting of Yahya from 2003. And so Kent Hovind is a perfect example of a secondary quote miner who is a very absorptive parasite. But Bill is a different category. He's far more generic in his discussions from what I could just see in the interactions that I had with him. He'll have a little selected bliplets of secondary quotations, but he's operating in a little different mode than a Kent Hovind is.
Yeah, well, I will also say, at the very least, I don't think that Bill is selling literal poison to unsuspecting people who want a treatment for cancer.
No, like what's his name, Jim Baker.
Well, I mean, Kent is doing that too. He's selling people. He's trying to get people to take Laetrile as a as a cancer treatment. Nestle, did you want? Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry, I saw your screen come up.
No, and Bill is amiable and friendly, and they're not. The vast majority of creationists are amiable and friendly. Mike Riddle is just as pleasant to talk to as all get out on there. So it's an interesting little conversation you can get with them on it. The question is, how familiar are they with the data field? And it doesn't look like Bill is any different from Mike Riddle. He basically riffs off of stuff the other creationists have said that he may not really even remember where he got it from.
Yeah. Oh, and Taco in the chat points out B17. Yeah, you know about vitamin B17, RJ? It's not a real vitamin.
Not in detail, no.
It's basically amygdalin, or it's slightly varying form Laetrile. It's a
Laetrile, yeah.
Yeah, it's a compound found.
Yes, the orange pit thing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's found in a few different things.
Peach pits or something.
Peach pit, yeah, peach
pits, and so basically it breaks down into the body into, among a few other things, hydrogen cyanide. And people who consume
sounds bad.
Yeah, well, people who consume large amounts of it come down with cyanide poisoning symptoms, unsurprisingly.
Did someone say Darwin Award?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But Hovind has long been promoting it as a cancer cure and preventative. And so he has been selling, I don't remember which kind of seeds. I think it's apricot seeds. And so,
it's been a trope in that kind of pseudoscience worldview for years and years and years. I vaguely recall it had a big heyday in the 1970s, and it keeps coming back like a bad penny, apparently.
Yeah.
There's remarkably little really original stupid. That most of the stupid that's generated is stuff that somebody has stumbled on that's previous stupid that they've never fact-checked.
Well, I heard a claim for the first time, I think 2 days ago, and maybe you have or haven't heard it. I'm gonna pass it by you and let me know if you've heard this one before. conjoined twins result from a, quote, split in the DNA that didn't finish. Have you heard that claim before?
No, and I wish I had.
No, but
that was
that's the one thing that's very useful about the source methods approach, is that if you can read their presentation, and especially if they give a source or particular phrases and terminology, in principle, you can go in and start source checking the components. And you may be able to track down whether the notion is genuinely original or whether it's riffed off of an unspoken secondary source. That it's like a detective trail that you and typographical errors, or if they reference a source citation, type it in exactly as the person uses it. That can sometimes provide a cue, because you can find particular ways where the semicolon is in a certain spot, and that can help isolate where they're getting their information from.
So I do want to, so there's a couple comments that I want to bring up. And Resistance says, I really wish you guys would call out the hypocrisy more, like Bill talking over people all the time when he gets annoyed and then gets talked over. And I'll say this, sometimes these things, I don't think anyone was angry, but these things can get a little heated, and it's not always easy to recognize the degree to which you're talking over versus being talked over. And so I'm going to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and say that it's hard to make that self-assessment accurately, because everyone's ideal is that they say everything they want to say when they want to say it. And any interruption to that is always a big, needle in your brain, like, oh, I got interrupted. But when you interrupt other people, it doesn't seem as unreasonable. So I do want to put that out there.
Now, Bill is a hypocrite, though, in saying, oh, you're trying to bring in all of these things and barrage on him, where he has a scattershot of claims that he makes. And whenever we've tried to pin him down on what he means by them, suddenly he's moving to another subject.
Yeah. And also, am I a self-righteous jerk? Apparently that's been an accusation.
Oh, I defer to no one on being self-righteous jerk here. I take the high ground on that thing. You're an amiable, pleasant person by comparison to me. I
try to be amiable, but we'll ask. So Nestle20 here is perhaps one of my. I mean, you subscribed to me when I had fewer than 100 subscribers.
Four videos, only just 4.
Yeah. So you probably, of my audience, have been watching longer than virtually anyone, except maybe my personal friends like Bent Hovind. So, am I a self-righteous jerk? What do you think? You can say yes, it's fine.
I don't. I didn't get the impression. Well, except for when you tried to beat David Attenborough.
I was just bad at it. That's not the same thing as being a jerk, is it?
No.
Yeah, one has to have that.
Just a little jab. That's all.
Yeah. No, look, I'm not claiming that my David Attenborough impression was spot on. It was just for fun. Have you seen that one, RJ?
No, I haven't. He's a fun one to do with it. You always have to have the word "indeed" in there.
Yeah.
Over in the corner is one of the most extraordinary organisms in the world. Indeed.
I believe I did put "indeed." I think maybe 3 or 4 times. But so it's a quick little video I did called "What Good Is Half a Wing?" where I look at fossil and modern examples of animals that are essentially morphologically transitional between having no flight ability and having true flight.
That's one of Bill's questions
about dinosaurs and bird wings, is that there is nothing needed to get from a dinosaur arm to a wing. That literally all you have in a bird wing is a bit more feathers that are specialized for flight. That all of the arm movements of the Maniraptoran theropods and the flight strokes and all of that are already present in the dinosaur. It requires absolutely nothing new. That's why it's hilarious. Now, literally none of that information shows up in the creationist apologetics. And since Bill doesn't even read much of that, he's way down the curve. And I suspect that's why I really would love to see him explain for each one of his questions what he thinks evidence would need to look like to persuade him, if you can ever get him to specify that.
Well, one thing I do feel like is I think a lot of creationists, when they're asking for this quote reptile bird transition, and I really don't like saying the reptile X transition. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine because birds are reptiles. If you want to call if alligators are reptiles, then birds are too. Yeah. And like the reptile,
that's a systematic thing. They don't get that.
Yeah. Well, regardless of how much it bugs me, but it always seems like their starting point that they are looking at is essentially a lizard.
Yeah.
Yes, they want you to tell them how a lizard became.
How did its leg evolve into a wing?
Right. It's like, well, it wasn't a leg. Yeah. It was an arm. And then but the thing is, I think part of that is it doesn't seem as implausible to go from a leg to an arm because, there are many things that use their forelimbs as both. Like you look at most monkeys that walk on their forelimbs, but also use those same limbs for manipulating food or for climbing things or even throwing things. Because while most monkeys aren't particularly good at throwing things, unlike virtually the entire rest of the animal kingdom, monkeys, including humans, do throw things.
Now, another way in which Bill is Kent Hovind-esque, and it's not because he's copying Kent Hovind, it's that this is a common element in grassroots creationists, is that obsession that he has about living forms. For them, a transitional can only be a transitional if it's alive now. They want the living form between a bacterium and a person to be alive now. They need the hominid transitional ape man living now. And the moment you say, oh, it's a fossil form, boop, then they say, see, it doesn't count.
Well, we actually have some like maybe not transitional form in like some sense, but in like an environmental lifestyle sense, like seals. They don't have they don't specialize for land nor for the ocean, but they are like in between. Like they have to go onto land to give birth, for example.
Yeah.
In fact, when you dive into any of the technical literature, which of course Bill never does, and that's because the secondary sources he relies on never did that for him, that there's a huge amount of this is almost that when you look at everything in metabolism, in the way oxygen is run in organisms and metabolic rates and all, there's a pile of, well, this is a rather unusual version of that in the reptiles, and they go to this direction in that, and the same thing goes with hearing, that you find that there's a large number of examples of various reptilia forms that exist in the living world that make use of the bones to hear with in one form or another in transmitting acoustic waves. And so it's just a vast amount of material, most of which is in relatively obscure specialist journals. This is not the stuff that's going to pop up in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science or Nature. It's going to be in the Journal of Comparative Anatomy or in ontological journals. They're obscure ones that are known to the people in the field and are cited in the technical literature, but are not instantly hot ticket items that people are doing videos on. But it's all accessible if you ferret through the sources.
I do want to point out, we continue to have a creationist hanging out in the chat. And I'll tell you what, man, send me a tweet.
Yeah. If you got your little camera or your audio even.
Yeah, I think it's all.
It's possible. I'm always amused. If Standing for Truth were here, I could say it to him personally. But Standing is constantly saying, oh, let's have another debate. Let's have another debate on this. Let's talk about Jensen and all that. And yet he never actually ends up arranging one. And then the trolls circulating around Standing says, see, Downer doesn't want to debate. I have never refused to do a debate with anybody so far. It just is that.
Yeah, you actually have to ask RJ to debate.
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, I am such a shy creature. I am so hard to get to debate.
My thing for debates is that I don't like debates with broad titles because of that reason that I was going over. So I do have a video called Debate Me where I basically lay out this is what it takes to get me debate. And I don't think it's very unreasonable or very hard to do. And basically my number one requirement is that let's pick a topic, because creationists like to say, oh, well, let's go like one topic at a time. And then they do this ridiculous scattershot.
The Gish Gallop.
Right. So like, that's why when I debated Kent Hovind, it wasn't creation versus evolution. It's, are birds dinosaurs? Because that way, when he goes into, like he did, into things like, you know, what about Charles Darwin? He loved worms and he hated birds, so he shot all the birds, even though he kept pigeons. So I don't know to what degree he hated birds. But either way, no matter how much Charlie Darwin loved worms and hated birds, like he could have been the god of hating birds. None of that makes dinosaurs not birds. It has.
Yeah, I'm less of a problem on debating format because in some sense I'm kind of improvish, so that I can think on my feet fairly quickly. And the other area is that in most cases, I know the data field and their own apologetics as well, if not better than they do. So I can then target my responses on the fly to deal with their stuff. Because, and in Kent Hovind's case, my God, is there anybody who is more monotonous in his presentation than Kent Hovind? He very seldom trots off anything new. So you can be prepared for an awful lot of his apologetics that way, and then try to end run in for the benefit of the viewer to try to get them to get to the Holy Grail, which is don't take our word for it, fact check it, damn it, on your own.
Yeah. Well,
Ken's claims are old, like very old. Like the only difference is like he leaves some of them out that are obviously wrong, and he never talks about it.
And comes back to some of them though. He keeps on returning to that Archaeopteryx fraud thing. He was doing that just a year or two ago.
Archaeopteryx
just gobsmacked me.
No, sometimes
that Archaeopteryx was a fake.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's been debunked so much that even creationists don't use it.
Yeah, there's only a few dozen specimens of different Archaeopteryx species.
Right.
And all of them from a single deposit, Solnhofen.
Yeah. Well, and
by the way, though, they have already found enough variation that there are at least 2 species involved.
One thing that always gets me, and I wanted to get into it a little bit more, was that when we got into the fake fossils from China, the thing is that they're not fake as fossils; they're composites of real fossils.
Yeah.
And the thing is that
Archaeoraptor
was part Microraptor, and that's a big find. Microraptor.
Microraptor is way more interesting. We mention it in the new book.
Yeah, Microraptor, the not bird considered to be a bird by AIG.
Yeah, have you heard about that, RJ?
Yeah, well, that's the funky part. That's the snag for Fiducia. Fiducia's obsession is feathers. And his basic model is that feathers are so specialized and unique that if it's got feathers, it's a bird. And that put him in a weird world when it came to all these Coelurosaurs, because Richard Prum even was gobsmacking when he was commenting. I think it was in the AUK where he was making some comments on some of Fiducia's views. But he said, listen, for years, Fiducia have been claiming that Coelurosaurs are dinosaurs that only superficially resemble avian characteristics, but they're really just dinosaurs, until they've started finding feathered examples, in which case suddenly he turns around and now those same taxa are now flightless birds that only bear a coincidental similarity to dinosaurs.
Right.
He went from banned to manned. Manoraptors are not dinosaurs.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's crazy. And the thing is that if you look at what are the criteria that you use to place an organism in Dinosauria, not only do all the Manoraptorans have them, very obviously, but modern birds do too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the fun part when Jackson and I were compiling the list for the new book, let me get to the page on it here, is that we were gobsmacked as to just how many genera are literally known to have feathered examples by the fossils, but even more so, there's a whole slew of ones, Sericornis, Pedopena, Anchiornis, Zhaotingia, Eospina, oh, I'm mangling the names here, Yixianosaurus, Ambopteryx, Yichi, Scansera, oh god, I can't
Utarenus,
Epidepteryx, all of which predate Archaeopteryx. Right. That's a gigantic filling in of the data field that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah. The papers are all fairly recent. I think. I'm sorry. The oldest one, I think, is 2002 on Scansieripteryx. And Circus and Fiducia were still trying to argue that it was a flightless bird in 2014. Needless to say, they haven't gotten very far with it.
Yeah. But you know what? If it's part of this trend that I see, and it's not just creationists, it's a lot of pseudoscience in general. Well, you'll find some person who disagrees with the consensus. And the mere fact that he disagrees with the consensus is taken as evidence for your particular version of pseudoscience, even though this person who disagrees doesn't support your crazy ideas anyway.
Look at me and the new Galileo.
You and Galileo?
Look at me and the new Galileo.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm going to go against it. It's like, maybe you are, buddy. I mean, it's possible, right?
Yeah.
It's extremely unlikely, but I guess I can't say that it's 100% for sure that Alan Fiducia is wrong. Maybe Velociraptor isn't a dinosaur, and it's basically a crocodile with feathers. It seems pretty ridiculous. But the thing is,
the thing you have to remember about the creationist apologetic is that it comes from that religious worldview where proof texting comes with the turf. Isaiah 12:16 says thus. So when they look at quotes that they have gotten from the quote mill, they're approaching it exactly the same way they do their religious apologetics. So if you have Alan Fiducia saying something snarky about the bird dinosaur model, or the notorious Darwin quote from the Eye, which they always take out of context, and so forth and so on, well, thus spake out of their own words. One of Henry Morris's book was out of their own mouths. That was a listing of this kind of stuff. Framework, that's all they need to do. They have the words, boop, they don't have to think about it.
You know what boggles me, how they think that it's citing Fiducia is like smart, because like from their point of view, Fiducia's view is actually more absurd, because he thinks that some of these dinosaurs that are not birds are birds, like Velociraptor. So why don't they cite people like David Peters, for example?
Well, because they're not going to look into the work. They're going to ignore the stuff. If we got to that source analysis level, I think it's going to be dry wells with Bill Morgan all the time. That he will have never read anything in there. And I think you made a very good point, Dapper, about the fact that you have already encountered him saying, "Oh, I'll look into that," and then it turns out no, he didn't.
Yeah. In fact, actually, I did do a short video about this particular topic with Bill. It's called "Doing Bill Morgan's Research for Him," in which I went and looked into some of these topics. And I was like, here are some dinosaurs that had feathers. You should look at the fossils of them.
Yeah. What stops him from doing that himself? I am not a guy with a PhD, and I'm not a person with a science degree. I have a BA in history. But excuse me, I can read, I can download PDFs, I can study. Anybody can do that. If I can do it, what stops him?
RJ, don't feel too bad. You're not the only person in here whose only degree is a BA in history.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that ironically in my life, the most influential person on my thinking was not any of the ones that I was bumping into in the science world, but my historiography teacher. He was this wonderful professor, Professor Barnes at EWU. He's dead now. To show you how long ago this is in the worldview, this was a time when professors smoked pipes in class.
Nice.
And so he would come in with his pipe, and there would be a little array of smoke behind. He looked like a cross between James Mason and Jimmy Stewart. And he never raised his voice. He was calm and thoughtful, but he was a stickler for, it was historiography, which is the history of history class, that term. And he would be very adamant in banging it into us, never confuse a primary with a secondary source. That if you read Smith telling you about Jones, the quote, and that's exactly what Bill's doing with the authority quotes that he's got, that from a source methods direction is how I describe that term now, source methods. But from a scholarly method, you know nothing about what Jones said. You only know what Smith said Jones said. And until you go look at Jones, you don't know diddly about Jones. That kind of attitude is core to sound scholarly method, and it's a practice that you will not find creationists using.
Yeah. And on Alan Fiducia and calling dinosaurs birds, and when they're not birds, Tyrannus. That's a slippery slope.
Yeah, once you start saying T-Rex is a bird, it's just like,
Yeah.
come on, guys.
Calling
Really?
a tyrannosaurid that's bigger than any bird, flightless or not.
Oh, and by the way, diagnostics here. What you want to look at is the bloody pelvis, among other things.
Oh yeah.
That the interesting bit that links up your Maniraptorans with birds is the fact that their Saurischian pelvic structure has morphed around to become increasingly bird-like.
Yeah.
That's not occurring in all of the other theropods. So you have feathered theropods, but their pelvic structure ain't bird-like. It's more standard Saurischian. So that's the reason why you can be quite certain this ain't no bird. This is a dinosaur that's got feathers on it. And there was a case that I mentioned in Slam Dunk, and we allude to it in the new book, of where Michael Denton was trying to dismiss feathered theropods, and he's an intelligent design guy. Does he cite any of the technical literature? No. He cites Casey Luskin on a particular dinosaur taxa. And when I looked up the dinosaur taxa, it turned out that Casey Luskin had completely misrepresented the source material on this thing. And it was this daisy chain bit, it was pathetic. And that's the best they could do? Well, Bill doesn't even get to that level.
Actually, one thing you reminded me of is you remember when we had the Utah Raptor skeletal reconstruction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing you can look at the direction that the pubis points. It points almost directly
That's your
down.
pelvic structure. Bingo.
Right. And so if you look at more basal members of Coelurosauria, it's still pointing sort of, anterior-dorsally. But then you get this just straight dorsal direction when you get really close to birds. And,
Does anybody know why there's a trend like that going from like anterior to
Well, a lot of it has to do with bipedal adaptations. It's interesting that over on the ornithischian side of things, their pubic structure is very, very different and oddly bird-like, but it's not really all that bird-like. But the irony is that when you look at hadrosaurs and all the rest, they morph around and they form an extension on that pubic bone that mimics what's Saurischian dinosaur structure. And in part, it has to do with the way the muscle attachments are running and the way that so many of them tend to be bipedal or temporarily bipedal. In other words, teeter-totter balancing on their hind feet and then using their front limbs kind of separately. You find that in hadrosaurs and iguanodontids and a whole bunch, even plateosaurs and others. And only when you get up to like the big sauropods are they now habitual quadrupeds, and the similar thing going on with the ceratopsids, that their little bipedal ancestors finally got so big that they're big quadrupeds, but with that kind of splayed front end feet that you find in protoceratopsids and then the ceratopsids. Is that a passing muster, Dapper?
From my understanding, it is, although I will say that I am not as up to date as I would like to be on the reasons for the shift. I would also say, though, that as far as I know, the current predominant reason why it's thought that at least ornithischian hips started to have both the pubis and the ischium pointing towards the posterior was primarily to allow for a larger gut.
Yeah.
So there is probably
viscera. That's a factor too, and that certainly applies with tyrannosaurs. And that when you get the bigger and bigger models, they've only got so many ways to do stuff. They've got rib cage to deal with. Also another little tidbit that was on that second illustration, that 2017 one that you put up. Don't forget those cute little gastralia bones that are long there. That's another detail that the very earliest birds have and gradually lose as we move through the fossil record of the Cretaceous birds.
Everyone forgets the gastralia. It actually
I know they just aren't sexy and everyone forgets them. But I didn't even know about that. But of course, in the systematics, they were paying attention to that stuff. So you have a whole bunch. The teeth and tail are the obvious ones, but don't forget those damn gastralia and also the little wishbone feature, which we now know a bunch of theropods had. It was not a problem at all.
Yep. In my upcoming video, there's going to be a little 3D tour of a 3D T-Rex skeleton. I will be making sure to point out the furcula, which is the wishbone. T-Rex had a wishbone. If you had eaten him for Thanksgiving, you could break the wishbone you might not have been able to. It would have been a pretty solid bone. Unlike that.
I'll tell you need a damn big barbecue to do a proper
You need a bodybuilder to break it, I think.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, in T-Rex it is fairly small because it's basically clavicles. So it's
Yeah.
I've held one in my hand. It's much bigger than a turkey, but it's not as much bigger as you would think.
You will still find, and this is a diagnostic, in fact, when you find a creationist repeating the dinosaurs didn't have furcula argument, you know they're drawing on really old creationist apologetics. It's a clue as to how far back, because it's not that the creationists have finally admitted they were wrong. It's just they stopped mentioning that in their more recent apologetics.
Apparently, unidentified Leviathan is under the impression that Archaeopteryx was a bird because, unlike every dinosaur, it had a wishbone.
Look at it in the side chat. Who says that T-Rex didn't have a?
Well, the interesting thing about Archaeopteryx is that of something it still does lack, and all of the earliest birds lack, and only develops later on, and that is that powerful sternum. So the birds of Archaeopteryx's era and well into the Cretaceous didn't have particularly good power strokes because they didn't have that extra musculature going down to that powerful sternum that we found in modern birds. So modern birds, the ornithines in particular, are able to just basically take off. Whoop! Archaeopteryx couldn't do that. I quoted, oh God, I think I've forgotten his name right off the bat, but he said that Archaeopteryx could probably fly better than a sack of potatoes.
Well, yeah.
Leviathan denies that T-Rex has a wishbone because he looked at.
Oh, well, he's wrong then.
Yeah.
Fact check.
The thing is that
this is a dead letter. There's been slew of them found in the theropods, and this has been going back for decades. So this is a mistake nobody has any good business making.
Saying T-Rex doesn't have a furcula is about as reasonable as saying it doesn't have a femur.
Yeah,
it's right there. You can just go look at it.
It's right there.
I think one of the things that strikes me about that's both annoying but not surprising about Bill and also with Kent Hovind, because they play this card immensely, is that for all practical purposes, the fossil record is irrelevant to them. That you can't tell anything at all about a fossil based upon its characteristics. And in Kent's case, you can't tell if it had babies. And in Bill's case, it doesn't mean anything. And even if it were a transitional form, which you can't get him to explain what that would look like, it wouldn't matter because it's not alive now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole, like, oh, where are the living ones? Like, why should everything still be alive? Why is that an expectation? Why would that help? But when you point out
that's where the map of time comes in.
If I point out that, oh, hey, what about, say, a lungfish, which is in fact transitional between, say, more primitive osteichthyans and tetrapods.
There we do actually have living. We have living fish that have lungs, not just lungfish. And we've also got the swim bladder in teleosts, which is a degenerate form of their thing that branched off the lung part, went into a full-blown lung in the tetrapods and became a swim bladder in the teleost. The amount of information on this is absolutely huge, and that also is never discussed in the anti-evolution literature. It just off the
and if you bring it up, they don't.
Deborah, can you screen share my
absolutely
for a moment? Let's see here.
By the way, Nestle, you have been an annoyingly nudgy person on my area because you would be bringing up these wonderful technical papers and stuff that much of which I didn't know about. So I defer and thank you for your prodding constantly on these things, even with the thick accent. The living trilobites and all of the claims about. I think that's from the website. Gone or something like that is his name. He's got quite an extensive website on that because it's just like a complete systematic discussion of trilobites, oodles of postings.
Oh, hey, look, it's a furcula on a T-Rex. Well, I'm going to say on a Tyrannosaur.
Oh my! The little boomerang bone.
Just looking at.
Look, Leviathan.
Yeah, it's
right
in between
there.
the shoulders.
Yeah.
And by the way, there is a ceratopsid or protoceratopsid
in between the shoulders.
That looks like it's actually a juvenile Triceratops.
Yeah, or it could be because of the fairly extensive horns. That's another little thing that you can use if you're a paleontology groupie. That a diagnostic with creationists is if you show them a picture of an organism that's a fossil, can they identify it or not? How familiar are they with the taxa to be able to tell just from the picture something about it, what groups are it in, and that will weed out an awful lot of ignorance by their inability to be able to answer those questions.
RJ, have you seen the debate?
And from a defender of evolution, if you're a defender of evolution, you see a chart of critters on a cladogram. If you can't recognize some of them, maybe you need to study more yourself, and you should be very wary before getting into a debate with a creationist, because if they do know some of the taxa, they're going to eat your lunch.
I don't know if I've ever been introduced to a taxon by a creationist. I don't think.
True, but there are a few. There are once in a while you'll bump into a techno geeky type. Dwayne Gish was a techno geeky type. You have to kind of crawl all the way up to kind of Kurt Wise level to encounter some creationists that operate in that kind of a context, and they're very wary about what they bring up.
Okay. Well, RJ, did you ever see the debate I did with Kent Hovind?
I think so.
Okay, because
I haven't seen everybody's debate with everybody. I plead horribly guilty.
Okay. Don't worry about
not having done all of that.
Just on a side note, Leviathan denies that it's a furcula. So
I mean, okay.
Oh well, there you go. Denial ain't just a river in Egypt.
You might as well say that the bones under it weren't coracoids. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. That's what a furcula is.
What was your big take home for your debate with action was in dealing with him and all the rest?
Well, first I want to point out the thing that was connected to what you just said about being unable to identify things, because after having trouble getting through the idea that there are anatomical features that you can use to identify a form as a dinosaur, I asked him, okay, let's say that you found a skeleton. You're the discoverer of this fossil, and you want to know if it's a dinosaur. How would you personally determine if it's a dinosaur? And this is a man who has for decades been calling himself Dr. Dino, and has been trying to...
Suddenly you get crickets.
He said, well, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I guess I would have to do some research on that. yeah, you might have to do some research on that, because that's what it takes to know what a dinosaur is. And so
have you heard me bring up the double bottleneck problem with flood geology before?
I haven't. I don't know that it's been something that's actually come up in any of my discussions with creationists.
It's a thing that bears directly on this systematic issue, because it goes right back to that baraminology that Bill clearly has not read any of. There's a double bottleneck problem. The reason why creationists are the only ones among anti-evolutionists who do systematics is because they're forced into it. You see zero examples of old Earth creationist or intelligent design ever working out systematics. They may theoretically allow speciation, but that's as far as it goes. They never apply it to anything. Creationists have to apply it because they have a double bottleneck. There's a limited number of, there was one a creation week when God made the kinds, X number of kinds, however many that was. Then those kinds do something over the next 1,500 years, making stuff, at which point flood happens and buries those examples in the fossil record. Following so far?
Yes.
Next, Noah has brought those same kinds, the original kinds, aboard the ark. They don't think about insects and plants. Don't worry about any of that. But anyway, at least the animal kinds. And then they get off the ark, presumably at Ararat, and the animals scamper out and then do something else, which ends up being all the species we can see today. That's the double bottleneck. If they didn't have the flood to worry about, they could, in principle, have every damn species specially created if they liked. And you would have no problem. Then that way they would be able to keep humans as a special species, snapdragons as a special species, doesn't matter, no problem. Yeah. But they have a limited booking space aboard the ark. So they have had to scramble because they have to account for the fossil record, which is occurring. You have to go from an archetypal therapsid to a Dimetrodon or not in the space of 1,500 years or less. That's hyperspeciation.
Yeah.
And fossil, in principle, would have to be accounted for. And the same thing goes then. It turns out there's about the same amount of bottleneck, about 1,500 years, that all of the primary species that we know today would have to have occurred after the ark. And why do they look so different? And no creationist gets to that point, even in their baraminology literature, to sorting out what the kinds are and what does it mean to have hyperspeciation. And then how can they keep the bound over which is why the horse example is so relevant. How many of the transitional forms are shown on the arc encounter?
I believe there
they
are
got a pack of seated for a whale. Yeah. They have a long-necked, a short-necked okapi for the giraffes. The very they're insisting didn't happen. They're putting on the arc as though it happened. They are shredding their own literature in that arc encounter. It's a gold mine of evolutionary evidence.
So I'm currently doing a little video series. It's actually, I've finished making it, but it's, I'm staggering the release so it doesn't all just dump onto YouTube all in one day. And it's about this woman who's basically AIG's zookeeper, or one of their zookeeping staff.
Oh yeah, you've been mentioning that. She's a fascinating character.
Well, one of the things that she talks about is like, well, first I did talk about the fact that in the things that she's purporting are kinds, there is too much genetic diversity overall. And then she also goes on to say that all of the genetic diversity was pre-packed into the two animals that were brought for that kind. And so,
good luck with that.
She's also saying that natural selection only weeds out existing genetic diversity. It's like, well, then you have too much genetic diversity for two organisms to carry. Because
and why don't you find the remnants of that in members of the kind?
Right. And it's one of these things where it's like, okay, so you have two, she's going to say Felidae is a kind. Okay, so you have two felids. There's only two cats on the arc. At most, for any locus on the non-Y, so we'll ignore sex chromosomes for now, but on the non-sex chromosomes, nuclear DNA, you can have at most 4 alleles per locus, right? I mean, am I just crazy about this? Like, you can only have 4 variations per locus. So if
when you're talking about
branches,
yeah, so that's maximum heterozygosity we get out of this one kind. But we find far more diversity than that, and much of it is in fact very adaptive. So just looking at the very surface of the information on the genetics of any of these alleged kinds mean that something about their idea has to give. Their idea is internally incoherent. It's not even really its own idea.
And you know how they get around it? By leaving out the genetic data.
Oh yeah, I mean they have.
If you look at Todd Wood, we mention it in the new book on bats. It's hilarious. There's like 20 different families of bats. He decided to look at just 2, and in the one bat family that's very extensive in the New World, he explicitly says, "I exclude all the genetic data."
Oh, well, that's convenient. That helps.
Oh, those methods are excellent.
Tidies it up.
Excellent.
Yeah.
In all examples of baraminology, which I recommend everybody look into baraminology if you want to see just a hilarious something to read while the coronavirus disappears, is that
you keep saying the wrong
where they're
it is the virus.
They keep on flushing data down the field. So in every creationist example, you want to look to see how they're being very selective about what groups they pick up as outgroups and what information they leave out and what fossil taxa they decide to leave out. In every single baraminology paper, it's a data flushing thing. And that's why they can come up with the compartmentalized kinds of the very few that they've even tried to tackle.
Well, one of the things is it's sort of a problem with the whole baraminology thing, because if you bother to include more data, you can, even using their own not terribly rigorous methods, recover things like humans as being part of the great ape holobaramin, or you can unite.
They get into a terrible. We called attention to I think it was Todd Wood, who just shocked the bejabbers, either that or Kavanaugh, I can't remember which, who shocked the bejabbers out of the creationists when he recovered Australopithecus sediba as the human within the human holobaramin, and they were going, ugh! And so there was a whole bunch of ad hoc responses to that. And another one that's a squeaky wheel here is the horse sequence, because again, Wood and Kavanaugh's bunch back in 2006 had basically blown to smithereens there by accepting that all things from Heracitherium through Dinohippus and all the way to Equus is all a monobaramin, not even a holobaramin, a monobaramin. We're using baraminology buzzwords. It's an evolutionary subset of a created kind, a monobaramin. And we use each of those terms because they can be slippery on that. Anyway, there's a bunch of creationists who are going, if we allow Heracitherium and Equus to be in the same baramin, then how can we keep Heracitherium and Homo Galax from, and Homo Galax leads us to the tapirs, and how can we from linking up? And that's going to pull us into, oh my God, we're going to have parasidactyls up the yin yang. No, so they are denying that Heracitherium is in the horse baramin, and it's just strange to see them try to pull that thing out.
But haven't you heard the Heracitherium is just a Hyrax?
Yeah.
Oh, that's old. Again,
It's old claim.
That's going to be stuff that dates for the Dwayne Gish era from the 70s and 80s and 90s. And you'll find that not being discussed in the modern baraminology literature. It's just, boop, forget it. So anybody that repeats that trope is, again, putting up a little flashing sign. I pay attention to old.
Oh, if I may, like I saw that I have to go back to this, but Leviathan thinks that the furcula is not a furcula because it's slightly, or in birds, it's slightly further up the neck, somehow. Like
we await his learned monograph on that.
Yeah, that will be interesting because having, you know, I don't want to say butchered, but carved up some birds, I seem to remember the furcula being closely associated with the coracoid bones, but. Yeah. What do I know? I'm just a guy who can, you know, actually.
Yeah, what are you going to pay attention to? Those lying data or a WebTube commenter on the internet? I mean,
and the thing is, I don't even have to rely on the literature itself. I've just gone and opened up a bird.
He thinks like a furcula is on a specific location. If it's slightly further down, as it is in T-Rex, then it's not a furcula somehow.
That's not how bone.
That's the anal retentive version of pseudo paleontology.
Yeah, that's
it's pseudo anatomy.
Yeah, it's like, which actually reminds me of one of the things where it's like this idea that the homology is just the circular argument. I'm like, well, what about the fact that we can look at things like Evo Devo to determine whether or not things can actually be reasonably said to be homologous? Like the reason that we know.
Well, that's more of that data stuff, and they don't pay attention to much of that.
Yeah,
and another feature, to be fair, virtually none of them do work in the field. That if you look at that's why bringing up Sanford was so hilarious. Yeah, he's got some genetic chops in a very limited way. But that's about as far as it goes. And if you start reading the people who are doing the main work, it ain't Sanford. And so Purdom has a genetics degree. You wouldn't tell it by listening to her or reading her stuff. She's remarkably superficial in her discussions. Jackson was particularly gobsmacked over just the dumb things Purdom was saying. It's going, how, as you as a geneticist, can you say that with a straight face?
I mean, I don't even look. Okay, I'm trying to think exactly how I want to express this. I am not even close to an expert on genetics. In fact, I don't talk about it a whole lot because I'm far better at things like comparative anatomy than I am at genetics. I'm probably a bit above your average high schooler when it comes to genetics, but I am not even close to your guy who got an A in his first genetics class. So we'll just say that. But even I look at some of the stuff that comes out from Georgia Purdom, and I'm just like, what? No, that's not how.
Yeah,
no.
It's like creationism is an embalming fluid for the brain. Kurt Wise is one of the most fascinating examples here. Kurt Wise got a paleontology degree. He studied under Stephen Jay Gould. Apparently, little of it rubbed off. He's a careful guy and temperate in his own way, but when he does his creationist apologetics, he starts sounding as superficial as Casey Luskin. And I'm going, what exactly is wrong with you? Why aren't you using the same thing happens with Gunter Beckley over at Intelligent Design Land. Beckley is now their in-house paleontologist. Apparently he got religion a couple of years ago. So now he's jumped on the intelligent design bandwagon. He's an insect paleontologist and oddly enough, almost never uses insects as examples. He's always going after somebody else. And you can never pin him down on, does he think anything is related to anything? And there's that systematic problem again. And so it's like just kindly cause the brain to go blah, 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 blah. when they take up this stuff.
And the Ben Idzikowski.
Oh, you just got a compliment from Ben.
Yes, this by the way is not Benthoven, no relation. These are separate Bens who both know each other.
Okay.
You're not giving yourself a whole lot of credit on your genetics knowledge, and you know what? It may be that I am underestimating how much I know about genetics, but I think that's where we're getting into the problem that creationists have with the Dunning-Kruger effect versus imposter syndrome. I think most of us are.
I've looked at a paper. I know everything about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So most of us are probably in that sort of imposter syndrome area. We are probably judging ourselves pretty harshly on how little we know because we know how much there is to know.
Like, standing for truth, right? Right. Like one of his buddies is how's it called again? Nephilim Free.
Yeah.
Who, like he like in the beginning he thought that A paired with A and C paired with C in DNA. Like
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So
Nephilim.
There's not very many creationists that I have no real interest in having a direct conversation with, but he is one of them because every time I've seen him in a debate or a discussion, he simply rage quits if he's not allowed to talk over people constantly.
Yeah, that's the one person that I really lost my temper with because he had an after show when I had a debate with him. And so long as he was in the debate format, Jim, the modern day debate guy, was very careful to make sure everybody had their amount of time and bounce back and forth. So it was no problem on it. He can be perfectly polite within that context. Right. In the after show, it's his thing. And he would just never answer a question and would just keep hammering away with the same presuppositions over and over again. And I basically lost my temper and I said, I'm out of here. And I have a high threshold of annoyance on things because I am an arrogant bastard. And so I'm aware of all of that. It crossed my threshold. And that's the only time.
Yeah, and again from Ben, it says that knowing you lack knowledge and having the humility to acknowledge as much is a lot smarter than many of the de facto talking points creationists try and bring up ad nauseum. Yeah, I will agree there. Just knowing that there's so much that I don't know is a step above the average creationist in terms of, anything.
I'll ask you a question, Dapper, to see whether you use a lot of the same tools that I do. When you're reading a technical paper, are you particularly focusing terminology and stuff where you go, yikes, what the hell does that mean? And that becomes a clue as to where you need to do further research until you understand what that is.
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. Most of the papers that I end up reading tend to be descriptions of vertebrate fossil taxa. And unfortunately, I can't always get access easily to the full paper, but when I can, I especially dive into that. And they're definitely... Oh yeah.
Can you give Leviathan the tool quick because he wants to give a link in the chat.
Yeah, I'll give it to you for the duration of giving a link. Here you go, unidentified. You can post a link. And then
I suppose I better check my spreadsheet to find out if I've encountered Leviathan before. I keep track of those.
Sorry about that.
He's probably bumped into more since I started. And again, allows me to be sure. So if I'm responding to somebody, I know what they've actually said, not just relying on it.
Right. So many of the things that I run into are there'll be some term for some anatomical feature or something. I'm just like, what's that? And so I'll have to dig into what that is. And one thing I say is Wikipedia is a good place to start research, but it's never a good place to stop. Look at the sources for
Wikipedia.
Exactly.
It's a doorway, not a destination.
Right. So a lot of times I do start research by checking Wikipedia, and then I'll see,
I do too. It's a handy little guide.
Yeah.
It gives you a quickie guide as to what's public. And you'll notice in particular, I found in paleontology, you may have discovered the same thing. There will be some taxa that pop Wikipedia page on it, and basically it says it's a thing, and there's no sources yet. And that's an immediate flag. Wait a minute, be careful about this because it's just now hitting the fan.
All right, unidentified. It says that I need permission. It looks like you have.
He needs to make the document accessible to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if you're going to look at Wikipedia, you're going to need to look at sources, and say if you look at the source for distinguishing anatomical features of dinosaurs, it has that PDF that I just put in the private chat of the stream and the live chat from Sterling Nesbitt,
Yeah.
which is a
Some
whopping
things can be
292 pages.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was it?
Some things can be very hard to track down. I took a long head-banging effort to try to locate the technical literature, the development of the jaw structure and masseter muscles in mammals. This was a thing that was in really obscure papers, and it took years from the crumbs that led me to the work. It turned out stuff was available online. Up back that it wasn't popping up in a lot of things because it was like a settled issue. No one was discussing it, so it was buried in the backyard, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually run into that problem a lot where I just can't actually seem to get the source on it.
Scholarship is a
or at least
funky little thing to deal with, and
Yeah. Hello, RJ?
well,
Oh,
it's
yeah, I think you cut out a little
just
bit.
because
Well,
work
actually,
hasn't been done yet. There is
Yeah.
ants.
I think there's a delay, or it's not, maybe.
Yeah, there's a bit of a delay, but we're coming up on 2.5 hours, which is a little bit longer than I normally stream. So I think we're probably gonna.
Okay, can we wait for Leviathan to bring up what he's going to show?
I guess we can wait for a little bit, but if it's gonna take much longer than 10 minutes.
You can access it now.
Oh, okay, you can. Okay. So Archaeopteryx isn't a dinosaur. Nothing else. Nessa, you want to put that up because I'm trying to balance all my different windows that I need for this to sort of produce my own thing.
Sure, I will screen share it.
Awesome. All right, well, let's go over that, and then we'll call it. I think after we go over Unidentified Leviathans slideshow, Google Slides. Yeah, okay. Here we go. Archaeopteryx. Let's see what we got.
First slide, second slide.
Yep. Okay. 1 second. I just need to. Okay. It has feathers. True. It has a wishbone. True. It has the ability to glide, unlike all other. Well, wrong there. That's wrong. Reduced fingers.
Wrong.
Not really. No. Wing.
No.
Yeah. It has teeth. No chickens have teeth.
No.
It has a sternum, like all birds. Well, it has a flat sternum.
Yeah, they have the deep genetics,
They
and the
don't have
sternum is just plain wrong.
they don't have a keel sternum.
Yeah, it's the sternum of Archaeopteryx is not the same as the sternum of a modern bird.
Yeah.
So it's all right. What else? What else we got here?
Yeah,
I should point out-
to
I
glide.
should point out that in the
first, Archaeopteryx fly, and secondly, Microraptor. That is not a bird, and it is certainly a
the
dinosaur.
creationist apologetics don't pay attention much to Mesozoic birds. And so they don't realize how that birds continue to develop all during that period for millions and millions of years. And that's even before to the ornithine evolution that occurs in the post-KT period. They don't just they off their scope.
Let's get the next slide. I'm not sure if we can see the pictures.
There are no. Okay.
No pictures. Unidentified. I can't talk.
Yeah, the pictures aren't shown.
Are the pictures referenced to your hard drive? Because if that's the case, you'll probably need to make it not referenced to your hard drive. But what is that third slide?
Alice has to say, well, that must be true.
And dromaeosaurs all have wishbones. Incorrect. By definition, that's a wish. I'm not sure what this sentence means. By definition, that's a wishbone, but in terms of the actual skeleton, it's not a wishbone.
What the hell does that even mean?
The Allosaur, I'm looking at a picture of an Allosaur skeleton right now. It's in between the shoulders. It's exactly where you'd
that was
expect
part
it
of the
to be.
reason why furculas were hard to find, is because they're not attached to the thing, and so they could easily be lost. And they're also, in smaller animals, they're very small, and they were easily lost in fragmentary fossils. It should be pointed out that no creationist ever bothers to work out the forensics of what fossils were known and what was available and what's their taphonomy and preservation thing. This is a non-subject among them.
Are there any creations that even talk about taphonomy at all?
It pops up extremely limited. We have, in fact, a section on it in the new book, where we call attention to the fact that the few that even bring it up don't really discuss it much. It's just kind of a little side buzzword.
All right, and then it says Coelophysis does not even have a wishbone. I'm not sure, but I don't see the relevance of that if it's true.
Coelophysis is way back on the thing. Although
it looks like
Coelophysis was mistaken for an Archaeopteryx.
I looked it up on Wikipedia. Of course, not the final source, but Wikipedia says it has a wishbone.
I'll go with this, right? I don't see the relevance of whether or not an extremely basal theropod happens to have a true furcula.
Yeah, it's only important Maniraptorans do.
Right. Other theropods do. It was actually very common across theropoda. So the fact that one extremely basal one doesn't, which again, I'm not even sure if that's a fact, but let's just say that it is. I'll just grant it to you. Okay.
And we can presume that in course, because we can work out the genetics of the sternum and the various wishbone elements in living birds, in principle, they're going to be able to do paleogenomics to work out the dynamics of the ancestral form. It's only a matter of time.
I think we need to point out a big thing. Like he thinks the wishbone is defined by its location, but it's defined by being fused clavicle bones. He doesn't seem to be aware. He doesn't seem to be aware of that.
Better yet, Archaeopteryx wishbone looks more like the wishbones of other dinosaurs than it does modern birds.
That's unsurprising, since
it's more similar to those.
Archaeopteryx is an extremely basal, or I'm not even really sure that we should call it a bird. I mean, it's in that Ornithure general area, but
and it's not. It's definitely not that. Ironically, we've moved now to the point where a much more interesting question is, why are there enantiornithines, and how did that group develop? And there we still have murky things, but yet they were the dominant birds during the Cretaceous. The ornithines were the trivial ones, but this is way above Leviathan's pay grade. He hasn't even tossed off a Sogol.
What's number 5? Because slide 4 is just pictures that we can't see. So,
yeah.
What Google has to say?
What Google has to say?
What's the function of the wishbone? The furcula, or little fork. I like that you put the etymology in there. I'll give, that's nice. And I'm not being ironic there. I do like etymologies. Little fork in Latin, or wishbone, is a forked bone found in birds and is formed by the fusion of the two clavicles. Right. And birds, the primary function is in the strengthening of the thoracic skeleton to withstand the rigors of flight. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Just focus
on. And Leviathan
that
has the same problem I do. He hits a P instead of an O occasionally.
Yeah, look, I have that problem too. I look.
Yeah, it's easily done.
It's absolutely fine. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, look, you made a type. Like, whatever. Everyone makes typos.
If you don't make typos, I know. It's just, I just shows our common humanity. It's real easy to do. They're adjacent keys.
Yeah. Like, look, if your typo made it to like a publication, then okay, that's a bit embarrassing. But like, clearly this was not being submitted for publication anywhere. You probably weren't even trying to get a grade on this. So yeah, there's a typo.
We'd still like to see a source.
What does
number Google
say? Although it's apparently changing as we go.
That looks like another sentence.
Archaeopteryx is a dinosaur. Nothing else.
Oh gosh, that's atypical.
I mean, I agree with you that Archaeopteryx is a dinosaur.
Actually, very few creationists are willing to put Archaeopteryx as a dinosaur.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I think he's. I think this is supposed to be going on a.
Are we getting live? Oh, this might be ironic or something.
I don't know.
We're getting live updates to this, though.
Yeah. Also, I think we need to point out that the furcula is not defined by how it, like what its function is. Like, for example, my arm, I use it for grasping.
Let's ask Leviathan the killer question.
Okay.
Let us assume Archaeopteryx is not a proper transitional form between dinosaurs and birds. Please describe what a perfect transitional would look like, and how could I tell it apart if I had Archaeopteryx sitting next on?
Yeah, go ahead, unidentified. That is an excellent question.
Yeah,
It's essentially
he'll
the same
be the
question.
very
that we
first
asked Bill.
creationist to answer that question. It will be a put on fireworks display, news bulletin, if he does.
Well,
but
I really like how we're having this conversation via Google Documents.
Yeah, I will say, you know what,
Yeah.
unidentified Leviathan, he might do it, because
yeah,
you know, unidentified Leviathan, he's been one of my viewers for a very long time, and like I said, I like unidentified Leviathan. He's a good guy, so maybe we'll get this. What about the morphology, man? What morphology would you look at?
yeah. I asked this question, by the way, of Jonathan Wells. I allude to it in some of my previous work, and he basically couldn't answer it.
So we have
and that was
question.
after because he's brought up Archaeopteryx and all that. So this was not sandbagging him. But I was anticipating that he would not be able to answer the question, and he couldn't.
So we had this question from JG. Did all dinosaurs have teeth? Is that a diagnostic criteria for being a dinosaur? So it's teeth are plesiomorphic to dinosauria, which means that the default and ancestral condition for dinosaurs is to just all have teeth, and it actually goes back farther back into the systematics than Dinosauria. Teeth are basically plesiomorphic for craniates. No, olfactorates.
Two big words.
I mean, basically, if you're a vertebrate, chances are you have teeth, is basically what I'm saying there. But the fact that they are secondarily lost in some dinosaurs does not negate them being dinosaurs, because you can lose plesiomorphic traits. And
they have very specific things. Dinosaurs generally, they don't have the tooth specialization and cusp elements that you find in mammals.
Yeah.
And you do have some interesting structure. There's a lot of battery teeth replacement elements that are very
especially
common in dinosaurs and all of that. But
if you get into
a huge amount of time, which also creationists don't pay any attention to.
Let's see. Well, you could go by looking at how it comes
which of course you can't tell from.
I even think that some oviraptorosaurs were toothless and also had beaks.
Being very generic.
Yeah. So,
what would a perfect transitional look like, and how could you tell it from Archaeopteryx? And you get a brownie button if you can ever answer that question, because you will have literally been the first creationist ever to do so.
All right, what do we got here?
I can be smug and annoying on that because I study creationists with this particular point in mind. And I know from, I think, 9,000 anti-evolution sources by 2,500 anti-evolutionists that there are no counterexamples.
Well, he says that heteropods would have become smaller, but we see that trend. So
yeah. I mean,
that's not how you tell it apart from Archaeopteryx, is it?
Yeah.
Right. Archaeopteryx is already tiny.
Archaeopteryx is about the size of a crow. But the question is, if you had a crow-sized transitional form, how would you tell them apart? What features would the perfect transitional have that Archaeopteryx supposedly lacks? If it doesn't have any differences, then it's a perfect transitional. And that's why they can't think about it, because they would have to, it's that Buick in a junkyard thing. They would be finally defining something they would have to accept and then accepting it. Why are you talking about Ambulocetus? That's a whale thing. Please talk about Archaeopteryx. You brought it up. You deal with it. Run with Archaeopteryx and theropods, kid. Your connection is going. That's not the only thing that's been going.
His connection is going, but he can still type.
We want you
My mind is going. I can feel it.
The question that has been put forth to you is, imagine yourself a perfect hypothetical transition between dinosaurs and birds, as if those weren't, simply a part of a category. But imagine what it would be like. Tell us what it would be like that you could use to tell why it's not Archaeopteryx. Does it have a different number of fingers? Does it have a different arrangement of toes?
Lunate carpal or not?
Yeah. What is the difference between
an orbital fenestra or not? What is the diagnostic feature? And because No creationist ever gets to that level of analysis and lays out those criteria. There's no creationist for Leviathan to have copied, and Leviathan may not have a sufficient understanding of the issue to be able to work it out on their own.
Which, I mean, right now that's fine, but it's something that you're going to have to work on if you want this to be something that you feel knowledgeable about. But you know what?
And this applies to any taxa. It would apply, you would be able to do exactly the same theoretical question on human evolution, which we were trying to get Bill to get to, and he couldn't do it. You could do it with the reptile mammal transition. You could do it with tetrapods. You can do it with bloody anything you want.
Right. But we have been going for over 2.5 hours now, so I am going to go ahead and say we're going to have to call it unidentified. You can send this to me later, and I can email you back and forth about it. And
now is he reversing the question.
Well, all right.
Yeah, he's flailing because he can't answer it.
He can't
His brain will not go there ever.
But you know what? If you do have an answer later,
part
let me know. You can put it. You can tell me in the comment or whatever. Do be aware that if you relink to this in a comment, YouTube will almost certainly flag the comment as spam, but I will notice that most likely and restore it.
Yeah, and keep me posted on it if he supplies an answer to it, because I am just on tenterhooks.
I will, if I get an actual answer to that question, I will send that along to you. All right, any last words? Let's start with Nestle 20.
Look up what the furcula is. It's not defined by its position or function. It's defined by being fused clavicles. That's it.
T Lane, any last words from a fellow dinosaur who's its secretary bird?
Well, Archaeopteryx is most certainly a dinosaur, and it might be a bird. Personally, I'm more on the side of it being a stem bird. But it has features no modern bird has, like a long tail, unfused wing fingers, teeth, yes, but obviously there are birds that have the genes for teeth,
right?
But none that produce them and retain them. Yeah, it's not a modern bird, and if you say it is a bird, you have to accept that the features that modern birds don't have all came about through evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Archaeopteryx is a bird in the sense that Velociraptor is almost a bird.
Right. At that point, it becomes hard to say the Velociraptor isn't a bird, basically.
Yeah. You have to specifically specify like very subtle differences between Archaeopteryx and the bird and Velociraptor.
All right, RJ, final words. What do you got?
Oh, yeah, final words. Just thank you for having this old fart on the show. I can be an arrogant bastard on the thing, but I really look forward to seeing Bill's discussion and our discussion of those questions that he put up. Those are all absolutely fabulous questions. The question is that, does Bill really know this extent of what he's actually diving into on here? And I think it'll be an absolutely delightful opportunity when we get all the various people and things and issues on it, that it will be very educational, if maybe not to Bill, but to the rest of everybody.
And heck, you know what? I'll probably have to look up some extra things too. So chances are that I will also be expanding my basis on all of this information because, do I know the answer to all of these questions immediately off the top of my head? No. No, I don't, because what can I say?
I can tell you right off the bat, you'll be able to check in the indexes in my book and that Al Labardi on the matter of the feather formation and skin placodes and all that kind of stuff. That's some of the cutting edge work that's been done on that. They're in the paleogenomic era on that one.
Oh, yeah, we got a nice little screen.
Evo Devo.
Yeah.
This is a question for you, Leviathan. Can you answer this?
Ooh.
Yeah, actually,
tell them apart.
So this reminds me, I have a similar video in it's called Kids and Kinds, and I was on vacation with my family, and I asked, because Kent goes on about always, if you ask a 5-year-old or whatever, they'll tell you which ones are in a different kind. And so I put up a bird and 3 definitively non-bird dinosaurs in a picture like this. And I asked them to tell me which one was a different kind, and none of them picked the bird.
Yeah, I think all of those texts are discussed at one point or other in the new book that Jackson and I have done.
Ooh.
Yeah. Is that Balor, an Emily Willoughby Balor?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Emily Willoughby.
It's the little Bondoc theropod. I think it's from Indonesia, the fossils.
I thought it was from Europe. I might be wrong about that. Yeah, isn't it a Hungarian etymology on Balor Bondoc?
Oh, gosh. I'll have to look at my emails.
I mean, don't quote me on it, because how much Hungarian do you think I know? The answer is like none. So your answers are Archaeopteryx and Balor are the birds? Is that what we're getting? Oh, and T. Lane says, remember all, the Emperor protects. You know what? It's true, the Emperor protects.
Well, actually, he's right. Like, Balor and Archaeopteryx are part of the Avialum taxon.
Okay.
So, but of course, Answers in Genesis says that Microraptor is a bird too, but yeah.
There's still some controversy about Balor, though.
Yeah?
Balor is...
So they have to relate to juvenile features. Andrea Cow, 2015. So that...
even so, like the controversy around Balor just shows that the line between bird and dinosaur is like really fuzzy.
Yeah, in fact, that's true of all the major groups. It's the reason why there's a dinosaur formase, there's a mammalia formase, there's a crocodilia formase, that you've at every one where you're seeing in the fossil record a major transition to cousins that are in the almost and nearly category. And by the way, when you try to find out those pieces of information in the creationist literature, they're just crickets. They aren't paying attention to them.
All right. Well, that is, I think, going to be our final point of the morning, evening, night. I don't know what time it is where you are. Whatever time it is, I hope it's having a good time.
2:41 p.m. here.
All right. It's what it is here too. I would like to thank everyone who's here now, as well as both Erika and Bill, who unfortunately could not stay with us for this whole time. But please do check out their channels. They are both linked in the description. Erika has just started a new series looking at some Genesis apologetic stuff, and it's not the same stuff that I covered. So please go take a look at that. She has some great streams, some great videos about various. Yeah, Erika has great content. Go check her out. Bill has less content, I'll admit. However, I do like watching some of his debates and things. So if you are interested in seeing more of those things, check that out. As far as what's coming up on the channel, Tuesday is the next Kent with Bent. Right now, it looks like Tony Reed is going to be on.
Oh.
So, yeah. So it looks like we're going to have Tony Reed on as a guest. Then that Thursday, there's going to be another episode of Noah's Zookeeper, and this one will be the one where I'm wearing a tutu. So you do not want to miss that.
I just bet it looks just
It looks adorable. Trust me. I spent a lot of time handcrafting that tutu out of polygons.
Well, I could imagine so. Yes. Do you ever wear a cummerbund?
I don't. They're way too much trouble.
That's true. Yeah, and a little hands trying to do that.
Yeah. But let's see. Then right now it looks like Saturday will be the tour of the dinosaur skeleton. Unless something else comes up, in which case that may get pushed. But yeah, there you go. That is the current news for the channel. I hope everyone has a great day, night, evening, whatever time zone you're in. Have a good time. Stay safe out there. Please. And if you are in one of the various quarantine zones, I think our thoughts go out to you, and if you're the type who tends to pray, I hope that is something that you consider keeping in mind. And if you're not the type to pray, then I'm sure that you're
wash hands a lot.
Wash your hands. Well, yeah, no matter how much you pray or not, wash your hands. And our thoughts and hearts go out to you out there in the lands of abandoned streets. So good luck, everybody. Have a nice night.
Dog.
Yes.